transparent to us. Is it going to make us better? Is it part of a larger strategy? Nobody really knows. We also heard the plan to cut 20% of the flag officers. Again, no strategy, no plan. This is why the budget is so important. The budget can inform all of this. Maybe that's a good idea, but we have no idea because there is no transparency and no follow-through. Also, quite disturbingly, within the Department of Defense and also across the federal government, the one and only criteria that is consistent is loyalty to Trump, as opposed to loyalty to the law or loyalty to the Constitution. This started with one of the more shameful events in DoD history, and that's when we pulled security details from former members of the Pentagon who faced security threats. Why were those security details pulled? They weren't pulled because anything told us that they were safe. Chairman Milley is one great example. He was on the threat list because he carried out an order from President Trump, and rightfully so, to kill Soleimani in the Middle East. He's now on Iran's hit list, and we pulled his security detail, leaving him and his family vulnerable. Why? Because he had the audacity to say something critical of President Trump. I mean, that's just embarrassing. If you told me 10 years ago on this committee that something like that would have happened, I wouldn't have believed you. And now we have a dictate from the White House saying that all federal employees will be tested for whether or not they are supportive of President Trump. New York Times had a great headline on that saying, why does an air traffic controller have to be a Trump supporter? Well, I would ask, why does an acquisition professional have to be a Trump supporter? If you're focused on loyalty, you're not focused on competency, you're not focused on ability, and it is the wrong way to go. Even within the budget, we see the influence of the president over the influence of common sense. We've all heard about the Golden Dome. When I first heard about the Golden Dome, it was interesting because it reminded me of a joke I first told about 12 years ago when we were dealing with a large number of Pentagon programs that were more ambitious than practical. Future combat systems, the expeditionary fighting vehicle. You know, basically they had, well, this is what we want. And we had this joke that, well, all I want is sharks with freaking laser beams attached to them. That became the armed services thing. I actually have a little plastic shark that my staff made for me with a laser beam attached to it. Making the perfect the enemy of the good is a problem. And nobody on this committee knows what Golden Dome is. And the other thing that's really important about this, contained within that is one of the most important national security threats that we face. Missile defense and counter-drone. We have a lot of programs that people are working on in that direction. What happens to those programs when we take $25 billion towards a project that no one can explain and no one can understand? And again, we don't have a budget, so we're taking it on faith. That is deeply troubling. Equally troubling is the Air Force One airplane that we got from Qatar. There's all kinds of ethics problems with that, which I'll leave aside for the moment. But that airplane is going to have to be fitted to be Air Force One. It's going to cost hundreds of millions of dollars. Again, no transparency. We're not told what that's going to cost and where it's going to go. But because President Trump wanted it, he gets it. Hundreds of millions of dollars goes out the window. We don't have the capacity to sort of say, sorry, sir, that's not a good idea. And the last one on this list is one that, frankly, I had a hard time believing when I first heard it. Apparently, the president has decided that the F-35 would be a better plane if it had 2 engines. And to a certain degree, it's hard to argue with. I guess 2 engines is better than 1, except that you can't just add a second engine to the F-35. This is a program that's taken us over 25 years, and we are, knock on wood, finally to the point where we're going to have the plane. And I would have thought this would have been dismissed, but I hear defense contractors, Pentagon, they're looking at this idea. It is okay to tell the boss that he's wrong. We all have dumb ideas. It's good to have people around us who have the capability and the competency to say, no, we're not going to do that. We're walking down the wrong direction. In terms of the global strategy, I substantially agree with the chairman, except that I fear that, you know, America first does mean America alone. We've seen that in a number of different issues, certainly placing tariffs on absolutely every country in the world, irrespective of our relationships. Well, sorry, except for Russia. Didn't place tariffs on Russia. That alienates people. Cutting off foreign aid programs, which I realize is not the purview of the Department of Defense, but I'll remind you of something that Secretary Gates said before this committee. You know, if you're going to cut off the State Department, you better give me more ammunition. The two things are related. We stopped programs that were feeding hungry children in Africa. Literally took food out of the mouths of hungry children. Why? Apparently because there were a couple of USAID programs that supported LGBTQ programs. Now, why we didn't just cut those instead of cutting the ones that were feeding hungry children in Africa, I don't know, but that really sends the wrong message to the rest of the world. And the last one, and once we get to the Q&As, I would be curious to hear what the Secretary has to say about this, threatening to use military force to invade Greenland and Panama. I don't believe the President has actually threatened military force against Canada just yet. He's just threatened to annex it. So Denmark, Canada, Panama, 3 peaceful nations that we are allies with, or were anyway. The message that sends to the rest of the world is one that the U.S. is purely in it for itself and does not care about the rest of the world. And this has implications. We're trying to stop China. We are in a global competition with China. We have built up excellent partnerships across Asia over the course of the last 6 or 7 years, in Australia, and Japan, and India, and the Philippines. Largely, that was because China exercised economic coercion. They went ballistic on Australia for daring to suggest that China could be more transparent about COVID, and Australia recalculated. Now we are the ones using economic coercion on our partners and allies and pushing them away. And this filters back over to Ukraine, where I am in violent agreement with the chairman about how important Ukraine is to our national security interests. And I also agree with the Secretary. We need to get peace in Ukraine. The longer that war continues, the more dangerous it is for everybody. But the administration made a crucial mistake at the start by showing weakness to Vladimir Putin and fundamentally misunderstood the war. Actually put out quotes that bought into the notion that Ukraine was somehow responsible for the war, even though Russia was the one who invaded. And Putin saw that signal. He saw that big green light and knew if he just waited a little while, we would abandon our allies, we would abandon our partners, and we'd abandon Ukraine. The president promised to end the war in Ukraine on day 1. Now, admittedly, that was a moronic thing to say, and he wasn't ever going to do it. But well over 100 days in, the war is going stronger than ever. Putin is attacking more aggressively than he ever has, because President Trump sent him the message, we're walking away, it's all yours. We need to change that message. Ukraine can defend itself and we can get to peace, but not if we don't make it clear that we're going to keep the 53-nation alliance together and that we're actually going to defend Ukraine going forward. The other part of this that is deeply disturbing is apparently if policy isn't going well, the solution to it is to just act like it is. In the Middle East, you hear the president, peace through strength is back, everything's fine, we're all doing well, but just like in Ukraine, when the president took office, there was a ceasefire in Gaza. Now that war is going stronger than ever. The humanitarian crisis is growing. Israel is continuing to attack in Lebanon and Syria. Yemen is still a problem. Yes, for the moment, they have stopped attacking U.S. ships, but President Biden went through that as well. Attacked Yemen from time to time. They stood down and they stood back up, and now we are dangerously close to that conflict spreading to Iran. Do not misunderstand me. I do not blame President Trump for that, all right? But to stand up and say it's all solved because I'm president and to not be engaged and figure out how to solve it, just to imagine that you can create the factual world that you want just with your words is an incredibly, incredibly dangerous thing. The last issue that I want to talk about is the issue around DEI, because I am deeply disturbed about what the Pentagon is doing in this direction. And keep in mind, I say that as someone, I didn't love the excesses of the DEI programs they put in place. I live with them out in the Seattle-King County area. I think there were a lot of mistakes behind that. But instead of addressing that in a sensible way, we've decided to go at it with a right-wing cultural war, with a sort of right-wing cultural revolution that frankly would make Chairman Mao proud. We are banning books, we are pulling images down off of the website, leading to some just sort of ridiculous things. There was, of course, the instance when all reference to the Enola Gay disappeared for a few days. Now that's kind of funny because in that context, gay means something different. But why do we care if the word gay that means homosexual is printed somewhere? Why is that threatening to us? Why are we spending time on that instead of, I don't know, giving us a budget that might have been more productive? And then we're pulling books off the shelves, which led to one really amusing outcome where someone said in one particular library within the Pentagon, you could not find a copy of Jackie Robinson's biography. That had been pulled. But you could find 2 copies of Mein Kampf. So it's interesting, I guess, well, you got to have 2 because if one's checked out, somebody needs something to do. Why are we doing that? And now we've got the changes to the names. And this changing the names of ships, going back to the original names of the Confederacy for all of our military bases. A lot of different things can be said about this, but I just want to close by drawing one particular contrast, and that's about Medgar Evers, who is actually a personal hero of mine. I read his wife's book when I was a freshman in college, and it inspired me. My son's middle name is Evers. We are talking about pulling Medgar Evers' name off of a ship. Now, this is a man who served in the military, but also he stood up to Jim Crow, white supremacy, and racism in the South. And I know we're focused on the warrior ethos. If you don't think that it took a warrior ethos to do that in Mississippi in the 1950s and the 1960s, then you're just not paying attention. Why are we having this conversation? And Mr. Secretary, your summary of the problem, where you said that basically the problem with DEI is there just aren't enough trannies from Brooklyn or lesbians from San Francisco who want to join the 82nd Airborne. Not only do the trannies and lesbians not join, but those very same ads turn off the young, patriotic Christian men who have traditionally filled our ranks. We can go after the extremes of DEI without denigrating and insulting people, and by the way, leaving out the Jews, apparently, why we're putting that group in there. Because the thing is, the insulting, belittling language aside, you're right. There aren't enough trannies in Brooklyn or lesbians in San Francisco to fill the military. There also aren't enough, what's the word here, young, patriotic Christian men who remind us of John Wayne to fill the military either. We are a diverse nation. We need to be inclusive, and we need to not actively insult people who don't happen to fit our preconceived notion of what a member of the military should look like. So we're at a situation now where the military is denigrating Medgar Evers, who died standing up for the values that I think are central to our country. One of the things I love about the military is service above self. I mean, it is such an important message that everyone who serves us says that. No one I can think of personifies that more than Medgar Evers. Instead, we're going to go back to renaming the bases after the Confederates. Now, I know, apparently you spent a lot of time finding other names that applied to people who actually did serve this country honorably, but President Trump, just was it yesterday, 2 days ago now, down at Fort Bragg, when he blatantly politicized the United States military, sort of, as they like to say, said the quiet part out loud, that those bases are being renamed for the Confederates. So we honor white supremacist, slave-owning insurrectionists who lost, by the way, they're losers, instead of Medgar Evers. Can we please just stop and get back to the business of treating everybody equally and with respect? A fear of a left-wing cultural revolution is not solved by launching a right-wing cultural revolution. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
I thank the ranking member. And now I'd like to introduce our witnesses, all before us for the first time. General Kaine, have you been before the committee before?
No, sir.
I didn't think so. Well, welcome. Glad to have you. First, we have the Honorable Pete Hegseth, Secretary of Defense. We have General Dan Kaine, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs. And accompanying our witnesses is Ms. Bryn McDonald, Acting DOD Comptroller, who is here to assist in answering our questions. Welcome. First, we'll start with you, Ms. Secretary. You're recognized.
Well, Mr. Chairman, ranking member, distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify in full support of President Trump's proposed fiscal year 2026 budget for the Department of Defense. I'm honored to testify today alongside General Dan Kaine, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and Bryn McDonald, who's performing the duties of DOD's Comptroller and Chief Financial Officer. We are very proud to represent and serve our warriors and their families. And today, as they do every day, they're keeping America safe. They're defending our homeland. They're standing up to communist China. They're working hand in glove with our allies and partners. They are achieving peace through strength. I'd like to start today by thanking this committee and Congress for your bipartisan leadership to give our troops a big pay raise in 2025. This included an additional 10.5% raise for our junior enlisted service members, E1 to E4. Thank you also for supporting other initiatives that improve the quality of life for our warriors and their families. With a focus on our troops and their loved ones, we have directed additional actions that will further improve their quality of life. These include making historic investments in this budget to improve living conditions in barracks and base housing, reforming the PCS process to reduce the cost and stress of moves for military families, and improving the quality of the care provided by our defense healthcare system. The best part of our job is meeting and interacting with troops and their families. We hear their concerns. I know how it feels to face these challenges. I've been there recently. Each of these initiatives responds to feedback we have received from the force. We will keep listening and keep looking for ways to improve their quality of life. Under President Trump's leadership, this budget puts America first and gives our warriors what they need. The $961 billion budget request, more than $1 trillion in total for national security, ends 4 years of chronic underinvestment in our military. Now, as is customary with first-year administration budget releases, additional time was necessary to implement this president's initiatives. In the last 4 months, we've moved quickly to reverse course after 4 years of weakness and mismanagement. In that 8% exercise, we found nearly $30 billion in savings across the department, which we reinvested. We killed wasteful programs, targeted bureaucratic excess, and redirected funding from Biden-era priorities to President Trump's priorities. Working with the Department of Homeland Security, we have increased border security. We reduced China's malign influence in our hemisphere. We defended freedom of navigation in the Red Sea. However, we still have a lot of work ahead of us to achieve peace through strength, a lot of deferred maintenance to catch up on. To carry out the president's mission, we have set 3 priorities for the department: restore the warrior ethos, rebuild our military, and reestablish deterrence. First, we are restoring the warrior ethos. President Trump charged me to focus relentlessly on warfighting, lethality, meritocracy, standards, and readiness, and that is exactly what we've done since day one. We are refocusing on what is truly important, which is warfighting and our warriors, sweeping away distractions and bureaucracy. We are setting standards that are high, equal, and unwavering. DEI is dead. We replaced it with a colorblind, gender-neutral, merit-based approach. Our force is responding incredibly to these changes. Because of President Trump and his America First priorities, recruitment and retention under this administration are higher than they've been in decades. Historic numbers of young Americans are putting on the uniform and raising their right hand because they believe in the leadership they see. This budget provides a historic level of funding for military readiness, putting our warfighters and their needs first. Second, we are rebuilding our military. 25 years ago, our military was unchallenged. Yet we squandered that advantage as China carried out an unprecedented military buildup. President Trump, as he did in his first term, is correcting those mistakes. And we're doing this by, as was mentioned multiple times, reviving our defense industrial base, reforming our acquisitions process and working with Congress to do so, and rapidly fielding emerging technologies and new weapons so our warfighters can meet the challenges of an evolving nature of warfare. This budget invests $25 billion in Golden Dome for America, a down payment on President Trump's priority to defend our homeland. It also commits more than $62 billion to modernize and sustain our nuclear forces as we face rising nuclear dangers. The budget allocates $3.5 billion for the F-47, the world's first 6th-generation air superiority fighter. The budget will also revitalize our shipbuilding industrial base with $6 billion in funding in FY26, bringing it to $47 billion in total we request for shipbuilding, after neglect from the previous administration. The budget also significantly increases funds to buy next-generation technologies that we need now and into the future: autonomous systems, long-range drones, long-range fires, and hypersonics. We will put these capabilities in the hands of our military. These steps will help us remain the strongest and most lethal fighting force in the world for generations to come. And third, we are reestablishing deterrence. When an opponent sees our well-equipped and tough-as-nails warriors, they will decide that today is not the day to test U.S. resolve. Credible deterrence starts at home. It starts with securing our borders. We will achieve 100% operational control of our southern border, and to that end, illegal crossings under the Trump administration have decreased 99.9%. The Indo-Pacific is our priority theater, and China is our pacing threat. That's why I've traveled to the Indo-Pacific twice already to visit our forces and meet with allies and partners. As we shift our focus to the Indo-Pacific, President Trump looks to our allies and partners to be force multipliers alongside the United States, and we are making progress on those fronts. We applaud allies who are stepping up, but others need to do more, and they need to do it quickly. And at the NATO Heads of State meeting later this month, we expect our NATO allies to commit to 5% of GDP on defense and defense-related investments, something that was almost inconceivable before President Trump led the charge in his first administration and continues in this one. As the President has rightly pointed out, it is only fair that our allies and partners do their part. We can't want their security more than they do. The Department of Defense is executing a common-sense agenda to achieve peace through strength. The threats we face are serious. Our investments to counter them must also be. That's what this budget does. It matches capabilities to threats. While we long for peace, we prepare for war, and we must overcome decades of neglect and decline. We must fortify our position as the world's most lethal fighting force, and that means acting fast as our opponents are. This committee is our critical partner in everything we do, and we appreciate your leadership and oversight. We look forward to accomplishing these goals, to achieving peace through strength, to supporting our warriors, to protecting our citizens and our taxpayers. Together with you, may God grant us the wisdom to see what is right and the courage to do it. Thank you.
I thank the Secretary. General Kaine, you're recognized for 5 minutes to summarize your opening statement.
Chair Rogers, thank you, sir. Ranking Member Smith, other members of the committee, I'm honored to join the Secretary here today and Ms. Bryn McDonald to appear before you to testify on the President's FY26 budget. Today's hearing reflects our shared commitment to maximize efficiency, accountability, and lethality and survivability through the investments that you make in us. Ensuring every expenditure increases the survivability of the joint force and providing our warfighters the advanced capabilities, cutting-edge technologies required to dominate our adversaries at scale. I've got deep gratitude for everyone in this room and your commitment to helping us deliver the capability and capacity of our joint force and the 2.8 million service members, civilians, and their families to help us deliver the peace through strength that the Secretary talked about is very important, and I'm very thankful. It's my responsibility as chairman to understand the global situation, integrate the joint force to confront and manage risk worldwide, and ultimately advise our leaders. This demands a comprehensive understanding across every domain: land, sea, air, cyber, space, undersea, and all military services in every region of the globe, and frankly, all time horizons. It also requires making hard, informed decisions, which we advise on, in order to prioritize the finite taxpayer dollars that we have to ensure the greatest impact and capability for our joint warfighters across the globe. The President's budget enables the joint force to defend our great nation from adversaries seeking to do us harms. We are relentless in our pursuit of innovation and technology that allows us to deter and, if need be, win the wars of the future at every opportunity, while ensuring that we learn from the battlefields of the past and position ourselves for the battlefields of the future. This budget empowers the joint force to get after the Secretary's 3 pillars, as he just talked about: restoring the warrior ethos, rebuilding our military, and reestablishing our deterrence, and ensures our joint force is properly armed, globally integrated, and ready while doing our #1 job of protecting our homeland. The President's budget invests in our warfighters. As I said, to win on the battlefields of the future, we've got to be properly armed with the right capabilities, lethal, modern, reliable, and survivable at scale. Victory requires people and platforms that overmatch the enemy, systems that work together in the harshest conditions, and technologies that give our warfighters an advantage at the tactical edge. The budget gives us necessary tools to reinvigorate our national and defense industrial base. Our nation is full of incredible entrepreneurial talent, and we need every bit of it to support the increasing demands of the warfighters. This budget also helps the Joint Force become more globally integrated. I think of us as relationship entrepreneurs in the Joint Force, not only working together in the military, but working with our allies and partners, the interagency, industry, and of course Congress before crisis begins and before conflict comes upon us. Finally, the President's budget reflects our mandate to stay ready, always be on the account, anticipating the next fight and getting out in front of it so that we're best prepared for our warfighters and their families. The most important component of our joint force is our people. This budget makes meaningful investments in our service members and their families, improving the quality of life of our service members, medical care, and things important to them like the moving process. As I mentioned, our people are the most important part of this, and it's an honor every day for me to serve alongside some of the most extraordinary warriors, civilian teammates, and families our nation has ever known. I assure this committee that the force remains ready, capable to defend this nation, but we've got some work to do. With your continued support and prudent investment, we will maintain our competitive edge, strengthen our advantage, and ensure that our men and women in uniform are equipped with the right capability. I also remain thoughtful of those currently deployed right now and their families who stand the watch around the world, quietly serving to do our nation's work so that we can be here in this room right now. And I also hold a special remembrance for our fallen and their families who continue to show us every day what real courage and tenacity looks like. I thank the Congress and this committee for your support and collaboration in our shared commitment to deliver peace through strength. I look forward to your questions, and again, I'm honored to be here.
I thank the witnesses, and I now recognize myself for the first questions. Secretary Hegseth, you know, you've talked with me about this. We both know the President has a peace through strength agenda, and he's serious about it. And as I have talked to you about this, we are at the lowest level of defense spending as a nation in 80 years, and that has got to change. And I think that you and the President have sent a strong signal about wanting to get after that and change it with this year's proposed spending that includes the reconciliation package, which will put us over $1 trillion. It's a great first step. But as you and I both know, it's a 1 year. We're going to have to see continued funding, in my opinion, and growth in that top line in the out years. Do you share that opinion?
Well, Mr. Chairman, the baseline of our planning process for FY26 was working with our partners in OSD and the COCOMs and elsewhere, identifying the threats that exist, the priorities of the administration, and what we need to spend to make sure we have those capabilities. And that was a reorientation from the previous approach of the previous administration. So that included exercises where we looked at reductions, where we could reinvest those into different priorities. So when you look at the two bills in one budget that add up to $961 billion and over $1 trillion, truly a historic investment, 13% increase, that was our statement to the President of what we think we need in order to spend and invest in ways that are postured for now and into the future. And what I would commit to you and to this committee is that in FY27 and 28 and 29, in this administration, we will perform the same exercise, knowing that threats, we believe that the policies of this administration will lead to peace and more opportunities. But as our adversaries continue to increase their capabilities and we learn about what's happening on the battlefield, That will lead to commensurate increases in ours. So we anticipate through that review that there probably will be increases, but I wouldn't put a number to it in the future.
Thank you. I just share the President's commitment that every NATO member nation should reach 5% of its GDP, and that includes us. And I think we can do it by the end of this President's term, and I'm determined to help him get there. Secretary Hegseth, at the President's direction, you're developing a plan on reforms of DoD acquisition. Just so happens we are too. You may have heard of the SPEED Act. It's a bipartisan, bicameral effort. As you develop your plan, what problems have you identified with acquisition reform that need attention?
Well, our new A&S, Undersecretary for A&S, was just confirmed. Mike Duffy, he's doing a fantastic job. He's diving right into this to include the SPEED Act, which we're reviewing in real time, that identifies a lot of the same problems we have. Streamlining processes, consolidating. We need competition and actual new entrants into acquisitions in a stale process. It's too bureaucratic. There are too many gatekeepers. Too many programs are gold-plated, which add to cost overruns, and they're late to need. So throughout the entire process, we've reached out to industry and to innovators and to outside-the-box thinkers and said, what would you do? How have you looked at this problem? To include this committee, how would you attack this so that we can get what we need in the hands of warfighters faster? It's unacceptable in this real-time world we live in, where you've got off-the-shelf and off-the-shelf capabilities and open architecture opportunities, and you can do virtual design of products and that you don't have to build a hard copy, that we're not doing it faster. So everything necessary we want, and we're going as fast as we can.
Great, thank you. General Kaine, as you know, there's been a lot of dialogue around here about selling off some of our spectrum. Can you talk to us about the importance of preserving the spectrum around the lines that the DoD uses?
You bet, sir. Spectrum is a critical part of our warfighting enablers, and as the administration and the Congress carefully consider the slices that we must preserve, there are certain areas within that you know, my military advice to the Secretary and others is to hang on to that. I'm grateful that the Deputy has been really leading this effort with the Congress and to sort of measure risk. I understand that economic security is also national security, so the truth is always somewhere in the middle, but there are some segments in the lower end that frankly, I would strongly recommend we preserve and protect for defense matters.
I raise that because I want you to know we're going to be taking our cues from you, and if you're against it, I'm going to be against it. With that, I'll yield my time, or yield back and recognize the ranking member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just on the budget point, I made this point before the committee before. The House just passed a budget that adds nearly $3 trillion to an already out-of-control debt. So if we do really want to spend money on defense or anywhere else, we got to be willing to pay for it. And I just, you know, certainly go back through generations of, you know, bipartisan problems with this. You know, you can't have a debt that size and keep coming back talking about how much money you're going to spend, you know, whether it's defense or whatever your priorities are. And Mr. Secretary, you said the 99% down on border crossings and the border is secure. At the same time, we're going to take $1 billion out of the MILCON budget, out of building barracks, to send it for the border, and there's another 4,000 troops that we're planning on sending down to the border. Given that the border is secure, might you rethink that spending?
Well, sir, we are securing it. It is secure, but it's a manpower-intensive effort at the beginning.
Two different words there. It's either secure or secure, and it sounded to me like you said it was secure.
It is secure.
Okay.
What we're continuing to do is expand that and fortify it through infrastructure, which is a big part of the budget on the Department of Homeland Security side as well. So it's that $1 billion you're talking about was from the CR in FY25. We fully fund that back and more in FY26 with a recognition that we were dealing with the world as it existed when we came in. And the previous administration said they needed new legislation to secure the border. It turns out you just needed a new president.
I would point out
president
that
with the Defense Department and DHS that was willing to go to the border and actually secure it, which is what we
not submitted a budget yet. So whether or not you're putting that money back in remains to be seen. You have definitely taken it out. And I think the obsession there, and I don't disagree, the border needed to be secure. But from a pure budget standpoint, let's just not keep the political focus on that. Let's make sure that we're funding some of the other priorities that we have. So when it comes back to acquisition reform and the chairman's point, it's our committee, certainly Congress is part of the problem. We set up a lot of requirements. Defense contractors are part of the problem. I'm curious, how would you get after reforming the culture at the Pentagon so that you can move faster, number one, and number two, how would you get after the defense contractors that push the requirements process? And specifically, what would you do about the requirements process to try to speed things up?
Well, first of all, I think gold plating is a real problem, sir. I mean, across the department.
Interesting to use the word gold in this particular context, but yes, I agree with you, actually.
We maybe could use a little bit more silver plating on occasion. A recognition that the 99% solution is oftentimes the enemy of the 85% solution that delivers 2 years sooner. And that's contractors and other companies wanting to do right, but trying to do too much and overpromise, and then they're under-delivering, and the warfighter
not always wanting to do right. In some cases, just
not
wanting,
always,
just
not
wanting
always.
to make money,
So,
but yes.
The change is also in acquisitions about people. You need reformers in these positions. I'm here to be a disruptor of those processes. Our deputy secretary has extensive business experience. The types of people we're bringing in as undersecretaries have been disruptors and innovators in the private sector who recognize that bureaucracy can be dysfunctional and needs to be disrupted. So it's taking outside-the-box unique approaches. I mean, virtual design is a big example. How many times are we going to build something physically that takes a year to build when you could use AI and computing power, design it virtually, identify the flaws, and move more quickly, or create open architecture so you can move
Our committee
systems
stands ready to work with you.
I mean, there's 500 different things we can do, and we're doing them.
Yeah, and I'm sincerely concerned about this. Is it the policy of the Department of Defense that we need to be prepared to take Greenland and Panama by force if necessary? Is this a policy that you have within the Department of Defense in accordance with the President's wishes? I
heard what you said about those two countries and saying we need to worry about China. Well, we are worried about China.
That wasn't my concern.
China's malign influence in Panama.
I was concerned with us
China has
saying
control
that
of
using military
or
force to take
influence
another
over the
sovereign
Panama,
country's territory.
we should pay attention to that.
Right.
So Panama is very key terrain that we've focused on, and we've been willing to focus
So we
on,
should
as
take it,
is Greenland
we should
key
take
terrain.
it by military force. They're important. I'm not going to argue with that.
The Arctic is
I'm
incredibly
arguing with
important,
the
and
using
adversaries
our
are trying
military
to
to take it by force.
Our job at the DoD is to have plans.
Do you have a plan for that?
Our job at the Defense Department is to have plans for any particular contingency.
Including the contingency of basically invading
Any contingency you need, we've got it. We've got a building full of planners, and we're prepared to give recommendations whenever needed.
So just be clear, you have plans to take Panama and Greenland by force if necessary.
I think the American people would want the Pentagon to have plans for any particular contingency.
Not for that.
Thankfully, we are in the planning business.
Speaking on behalf of the American people, I don't think the American people voted for President Trump because they were hoping we would invade Greenland. I'm going to go out on a limb on that one. I yield back.
Gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Wilson is recognized.
Thank you very much, Chairman Mike Rogers, for your visionary leadership. And indeed, each witness, thank you for your service to America. And in particular, Mr. Secretary, your service is so appreciated, and I'm especially grateful as the son of a flying tiger who helped liberate China, as the father of 4 sons who have served in Iraq, Egypt, Italy, and Afghanistan, and as a 31-year Army veteran myself. Your leadership for peace through strength is crucial, and I believe we're in a Cold War we did not choose of dictators with rule of gun invading democracies with rule of law. It began with war criminal Putin invading Ukraine on February 24, 2022, and then Iranian puppets invading Israel on October 7, 2023, with the Chinese Communist Party threatening Taiwan. President Trump tried to deter war criminal Putin in his first term with Javelin missiles to Ukraine, American troops in Poland, and stopping Nord Stream 2. But Putin ignored Trump, and defying Biden has continued his efforts. Upon election of Trump, there were hopes for peace, but Putin insulted Trump with the murderous attacks at Christmas and New Year's. Every time President Trump tries to reduce the conflict, war criminal Putin increases mass murder of drones and missile attacks on the people and civilians of Ukraine, including hospitals this week. War criminal Putin is clearly fixated to resurrect the failed Soviet Union, with troops still in Transnistria of Moldova, rigging elections in Belarus, invading the Republic of Georgia, and rigging elections against the legitimate President Salome Zurishvili of Georgia. Additionally, there have been new threats this week against the Baltic republics, our NATO allies. Every outreach by Trump has been mocked by Putin. With that in mind, an incredible achievement of President Trump is to awaken our NATO allies, now including Sweden and Finland, that with Germany pledging now 5% remarkably, and 17 of our allies now provide a larger GDP support for the people of Ukraine than the United States because of President Trump's encouragement. What is the latest status on encouraging our NATO allies of providing for peace through strength?
Thank you for the question, sir. The one thing I would take issue with is the characterization that Vladimir Putin ignored President Trump. I think Vladimir Putin paid a lot of attention to President Trump in his first term, and that's why the invasion did not happen under President Trump's watch. Instead, under the weakness and perceived weakness of Joe Biden.
Ignored and proceeded to
He paid attention under President Trump, and then when Joe Biden was in the office,
it really set the stage, sadly, that if he had really appreciated what President Trump was trying to do, he wouldn't have invaded again, but whether Biden's president or not.
But to your question about Europe,
yes,
President Trump has invigorated a truly historic investment amongst NATO allies to shoulder the burden of the defense of the continent of Europe. Vladimir Putin saw what he believed to be weakness, and I believe President Trump has stood up to that by reminding our allies that they need to spend on their own defense and ensure that they're able to shoulder the burden to defend the continent. That's been a good development.
And indeed, I was grateful last February coming back from the Organization of Security and Cooperation in Europe and meeting with the president, and I told him how exciting it was to see our allies understand that indeed he supports Ukraine, he supports NATO and peace through strength. And General Kaine, I particularly appreciate your VMI credentials of professionalism, and with that in mind, we understand that even today, the International Atomic Energy Agency has declared Iran in breach of non-proliferation agreements, and what are we doing to deter the aggression coming from Iran?
Well, sir, first I noticed in your bio that you went to that other school in Lexington, which is always hard for me to get my head around, sir.
Hey, I grew up in the holy city of Charleston. When I saw Vimis, I thought they were Citadel cadets.
Yes, sir. I'm now a joint guy, so I'll keep all those comments to myself, sir.
You're here.
You know, sir, throughout, the IAEA report is certainly troubling. The international community seems to be thinking about what they're going to do about it, and as are we watching this situation develop and carefully monitoring the report.
Gentleman's time's expired.
America's in good hands with your
Connecticut, Mr. Courtney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, this morning, the eyes of our closest allies, UK and Australia, are on your department as a result of Undersecretary of Policy Eldridge Colby's announcement that last night that he's launching a 30-day review of the trilateral AUKUS mission. I would just note that it's not just their eyes, it's our eyes in this committee. In 2023, by a vote of 310 to a small minority, we passed the AUKUS authorities and followed up on that in terms of AUKUS investments in the billions of dollars into our submarine industrial base. Australia has reciprocated, as you know, with its own investments in our submarine industrial base. And since then, since 2023, what we've seen that the three countries working together, that we now have well over 100 Australian sailors and naval officers that have gone through joint training. I've seen them in my district at graduation ceremonies. They're joint crewing Virginia-class submarines. We also have joint U.S.-Australian submarine repair work that's happening in Guam and Hawaii. And our submarine industrial base last year delivered 2 Virginia-class attack submarines. They're the New Jersey, and Iowa. This year, it'll be Massachusetts and Idaho, and the year following, it's going to be Arkansas and the Utah are going to be delivered during that 3-year period. General Kaine, how many nuclear-powered attack submarines is in the Chinese Navy? Do you know that answer?
It's nuclear-powered attack boats. I
Yes.
mean, it's
How many attack
yes, sir.
nuclear-powered?
Many. I'll get you
No,
the number.
well, the answer is 6.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so what we've seen in the industrial base is that last year, this year, and next year, we're going to be delivering that identical number. They're building a 7th. You can check the Wall Street Journal, and you can see where that boat ended up at the bottom of the Yangtze River because of their inability to actually do the hard work of building nuclear-powered submarines, which is probably one of the most complex undertakings in really industry of any sort. Again, the Australians are investing in Perth, and so that we are going to have rotations of Virginia-class submarines that are already started to happen. Admiral Paparo testified in vocal support of AUKUS when he came before this committee just a few weeks ago. And again, I would just say, you know, there is nothing wrong with reviewing any program. We're all accountable. Anything of this magnitude certainly deserves review. But a 30-day review on a project that really took years to develop, in which this committee was instrumental in terms of in enabling. And in my opinion, China's reaction to AUKUS is the ultimate sort of endorsement of AUKUS because they hate it. And the one commitment I would ask, Mr. Secretary, is just your commitment that this committee and Congress is going to be integrally involved in whatever the review process is, because we have skin in the game, we have history, and we have allies who really are, again, issuing statements this morning. The Prime Minister of England, the Stephen Lovegrove, the Special Representatives for AUKUS, Richard Marles, putting out statements trying to reassure their countries that the U.S. is still going to follow through on this commitment. And we want that reassurance as well from you. Can you, again, give us that commitment that Congress will be involved in this review process? And I have one more follow-up question.
As it has been, Congress will be involved, but I've had an ongoing review myself. I've spent a great deal of time with Marles and Healy at the Australia and UK.
And I've been following your work
reviewing it myself.
Yes.
Secretary Colby's reviewing it.
Okay.
We know that. It's all important to make sure it fits our
Right.
needs
State
also.
Department, by the way, has skin in the game too, and they should be involved in it as well. I just want to reiterate Mr. Rogers' point and Mr. Smith's point. If we really care about strengthening the industrial base, we need to have procurement stability, which means we need to have a budget, a real budget, not a $20 billion shipbuilding budget, which Senator Wicker just eviscerated a couple of days ago. That's $17 billion less than the last Biden shipbuilding budget. That's what got sent over to us. And again, that's the way, and I represent a district that is the general contractor for both programs. You want to strengthen hiring, supply chain, and facility growth. You need to have procurement stability. That's not what we're seeing from the Office of Management and Budget. I yield back.
Chair, now recognize the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Turner.
Mr. Secretary, thank you for your written statement, and also thank you for your recognition of the importance of our nuclear deterrent, and specifically our investment in our modernization of our nuclear deterrent. We are behind, as you know, in the modernization of our nuclear stockpile. Your recognition of our investment in our triad and our command and control is incredibly important. Thank you also for your recognition of the importance of our future investment in missile defense and the importance that the Golden Dome will play. The Secretary General of NATO has recently made statements of his concern of Russia's future attempt to place an anti-satellite nuclear weapon into space. Specifically, he has said, "We are aware of reports that Russia is examining the possibility of placing nuclear weapons in space. This is very worrying. Space is also very important for our deterrence and defense, just as important as land, sea, air, and cyberspace. In recent years, space has become increasingly clouded, dangerous, and unpredictable. We know that competition in space is fierce. I recently had the opportunity to speak to him. He was at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, in my community as we were commemorating the 30th anniversary of the Peace Accords. His concern was that this is not getting worldwide enough of attention. We had General Saltzman recently in front of the committee. He has characterized that if Russia were to place an anti-satellite nuclear weapon into space, that would be day zero, that if that was put in space, that next day, that it would be irresponsible for us to count on space, that we would have to spend trillions of dollars and seek technology that we don't have to find solutions as an alternative to space, both commercially, for military, in really to redo what is really society today. As you know, it would affect both our nuclear deterrence, our efforts for missile defense, even our investments in Golden Dome. In this venue, obviously, we can't discuss all of the details of what we're doing, but I would ask if you would please confirm that this is a threat that is a priority to the Department of Defense, as it has been characterized by the Secretary General of NATO, and acknowledge that as it is a priority for us to prevent the deployment of nuclear weapons in space, and that it is a priority for us to work with our allies to uphold our commitment to the Outer Space Nuclear Treaty that prohibits the deployment of nuclear weapons in space. Sir.
Well, thank you for the question, sir. As you alluded to, there are a number of aspects to this question or answer that can't be discussed here, but I would underline our complete commitment to the space domain, to the hardening of the space domain, to prevention of escalations in the space domain, but most importantly, to the dominance of the space domain. I mean, that is, it is the future of how we see, it's the future of how we sense, it could be the future of how our adversaries fight and how we deal with that. So I think President Trump, yet again, was ahead of the curve when he created the Space Force in his first administration. People said we didn't need it. We are relying on it every single day now to ensure, alongside the Space Force and private enterprise, that we're delivering the capabilities we need that are resilient, that are redundant, that are capable of all aspects of all domain warfare, if necessary. And preventing adversaries from gaining an advantage is a huge part of how we look at space.
This threat is not classified. Russia's threat of deploying an an anti-satellite nuclear weapon in space is not classified. Obviously, this is a priority to the Department of Defense, and I just want your confirmation that this is a priority that you're tracking, and you too see that as a threat to the United States, and certainly to the United States and our space infrastructure, and certainly, our whole national security infrastructure.
We track all potential escalations, yes, sir.
And while you're here, I just want to help you out because people try to twist your words. You are not confirming in your testimony today that at the Pentagon there are plans for invading or taking by force Greenland, correct? That is not your testimony today.
All my testimony is that the Pentagon has plans for any number of contingencies.
It is not your testimony today that there are plans at the Pentagon for taking by force or invading Greenland, correct? Because I'm sure as hell hope that it is not your testimony.
We look forward to working with Greenland to ensure that it is secured from any potential threats.
Excellent. I yield back.
Chair now recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Garamendi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your opening statement, your concerns about Ukraine and the budget issues. Mr. Secretary, in your opening statement, you spoke to the issue of cutting waste and abuse at the Pentagon. I assume you intend to do that. Is that correct? Yes? No?
No, we have done that, sir.
All right. And therefore, it must be your responsibility. I want to bring to your attention a statement that the President made in early February. He said there is no reason for us to be building brand new nuclear weapons. We already have so many. You could destroy the world 50 times over, 100 times over. And here we are building new nuclear weapons. And they're building new nuclear weapons. We're all spending a lot of money that we could spend on other things that are actually, hopefully, much more productive. So I'd like to focus for a few moments on one of the most expensive programs at the Department of Defense, the Sentinel ICBM, which is to replace the Minuteman III. The cost of this program has exploded from $78 billion to over $141 billion. not including a new nuclear bomb for the Sentinel and the command and control systems, which would add somewhere $20 to $40 billion. All the while, we have a Minuteman III that can continue to provide the ground leg of the triad for at least 10 to 15 more years, should we cut the Sentinel program.
Well, President Trump is correct to point out that proliferation is very dangerous, but he has also in his budget ensured we fully fund the nuclear triad, every aspect of it in a historic way. The Sentinel as one leg of it, and that modernization is critically important. As you know, it faces a Nunn-McCurdy breach for being behind, and as a result, it has to be reviewed, but it's incredibly important. And so our budget does look at ensuring to...
Excuse me, sir. So you have made a decision to continue even though the review is incomplete?
The review is ongoing. The investments we've made allow us to continue should the review come out the way we hope it does.
You continue the Sentinel program even though the Nunn-McCurdy review is incomplete. I'd like now to move over to Ukraine. The chairman of this committee spoke very strongly about the Ukraine situation and the necessity of the United States being strong in support of Ukraine. It's very, very clear that a review of what Mr. Putin has said over the last 2 decades, that he is determined to reestablish the Soviet empire, and Ukraine is the current step to achieve that. Ukraine's security is our security, my view, and what is dangerous for Ukraine will be dangerous for NATO and therefore dangerous to the United States. Yesterday, 2 days ago, in response to Senator McConnell, who asked, which side of the Ukraine conflict do you want to win? And you said, the president is committed to peace in that conflict. Ultimately, peace serves our national interest, and we think it serves the interest of both parties, even though that outcome will not be preferable to many in this room, at that time, the Senate, and I would also say this room too, preferable to many in this room and many in our countries. Mr. Secretary, when you said that peace serves our national interest, does that peace come from a complete surrender of Ukraine and total victory for Russia?
That's never been a characterization of my statement, sir. We think peace is in the best interest, but I would point out, Ukraine is not the U.S. and Ukraine is not in NATO, and to draw that comparison is to draw one that is not correct. But we hope for peace. We believe peace is in the best interest of the United States of America, and our policies are pointing toward that.
Well, let me go back to what I asked you. Is that peace, could the achievement of that peace through the complete surrender of Ukraine and the withdrawal of U.S. support for Ukraine, is that a worthy peace, and is that peace in the long-term and actually the short-term interest of the United States?
If you look at the billions of dollars that have been invested in Ukraine, you could hardly characterize that as a surrender from the United States. So the existing military front line of troops is as difficult as it is, moving slowly. Where peace ends at the end of that, nobody really knows. But the president has worked harder than anybody else to try to get a peaceful outcome.
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Whitman.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank our witnesses for joining us today. Secretary Hegseth, Chairman Kaine, Mrs. McDonald, thank you. Thank you for the incredible job that you all are doing. Secretary Hegseth, I want to begin with you and talk about all the efforts that went into the defense portion of the One Big Beautiful Bill and making sure that we're getting all the pieces of this correct. Lots of back and forth, and we know that there's a long-term need to make sure that we get this right. And we want to make sure, too, as we look at priorities from all the different bodies, that we are assuring that those are continued on as the process takes place. We know there's going to be additional investments in things like shipbuilding and ground vehicles. And we've also made substantial investments in modernization, including things like Golden Dome, things that are critical to this nation's future. I just wanted to get from you, can you assure the committee that of the $150 billion that's here, that it is going to be laid out and spent in exact alignment with what the committee has laid out, really on a line-by-line basis?
Well, sir, you will have, and I can refer to Bryn on that for the details, but you will have a complete reckoning, and many of it the committee already does have, of what we intend to spend and where. But from our viewpoint, it's 2 bills, 1 budget.
Right.
And ultimately, we've worked with the committee and will continue to ensure that every priority is funded either through the base bill or through reconciliation. But I defer to Bryn.
Yeah, no, just concur with the Secretary. We've worked very well with Chairman Rogers' staff and with Senator Wicker's staff on it as well, and we'll continue to do so now that the data of the budget is released.
That's great. Listen, I think it's key, especially since there are a lot of different moving parts here, to make sure that we're all in alignment with that. Yesterday, Admiral Kilby confirmed that the U.S. Navy still needs a 6th-generation fighter, that FAXX is still critically important. And earlier this year in our Tactical Air and Land Subcommittee, we received a lot of testimony about the continued requirement need for FAXX, the Navy's unique need to have that fighter that is able to function in a highly contested environment, having the ability to deal with even more ability for our adversaries to sense that aircraft. We know that in the FY25 CR, there was $453.8 billion, put $1 million put towards that. I'll get the number right. And in reconciliation, $500 million. So you can see Congress is consistently pushing ahead and saying this is where we need to go. And we'd be a little surprised if the support for this fell off, especially since we're looking at the requirements and not seeing any change there. So, General Kaine, I wanted to get from you, do you still see the requirements for FAXX being the same today as it's been developed through the recent months by the Navy to project and say this is what the Navy needs in order to have that ability to provide a tactical air presence in places like the South China Sea and elsewhere where that environment is going to be highly contested?
Congressman, thanks for the question. And, you know, as we look at the threat picture out in the Pacific, the requirements themselves, I think, are still valid. I think it comes down to a question that many of the folks on the committee have talked about, and that's the ability to produce at a particular time. And I'll defer to my civilian leaders on the timing and synchronization of that program. But we do need, you know, capability that is mobile, whether it's FAXX or others that enable us to win on the battlefields of the future. I'll defer to the Secretary and Bryn for policy-related stuff on the synchronization.
Well, Secretary, I'll ask in addition to that, I think to build on Chairman Kaine's comments, has the Pentagon's plans changed? Because, you know, since April, and especially in our subcommittee, you know, we've looked very, very specifically about this need, looking at NGAD, which the President's made a decision on, but then looking at the Navy's need. Can you tell us, are things continued on track for FAXX? Are there any changes there? Well,
sir, as you know, certainly we have adjusted the way we see the world from the Biden administration through interim national defense strategy and planning guidance.
Sure.
That's what went into the decision that we made on F-47 or NGAD, and this budget has a significant investment in that. FY26 funds the complete design of FAXX. We're certainly reviewing it, working with the joint staff, working with the COCOMs at its application around the globe. So it's in the mix. But we recognize we also need a capability as quickly as possible for the threats that we face.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Moulton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Hegseth, I'd like to clarify a few important details for the record. When you texted the launch time for F-18s going into combat over enemy territory facing anti-aircraft missiles on an unclassified signal chat, did that launch time come from Central Command, yes or no?
I know what you're referring to, and there were no
It's a very simple question. Did it come from? It's a very
or,
simple question. Did it come from Central Command?
Well, in this committee, no way in which I communicate or what I communicate on a successful strike is something that I would share.
So you can't even identify the combatant command under which this operation occurred?
Well, everybody knows the commander.
Okay, so everyone knows the Central Command. So when Central Command sent you this information, did they send it on a classified system or an unclassified system?
Well, as you know, having served yourself, any way that the Secretary of Defense communicates or provides information in and of itself is classified and not to be discussed.
So what was the classification marking of the launch time when it was sent to you? Because DoD regulations require information on classified systems to be marked.
What was the classification mark time?
Yeah, what was the classification marking? Because
Again,
DoD
classifications of any information in an ongoing operation that was successful are not things that would be disclosed in a public forum.
You can very well disclose whether or not it was classified. It's not classified to disclose whether or not it was classified. And in fact, DoD regulations state that any classified information has to be labeled with its classification. Was it classified secret or top secret?
What's not classified is that it was an incredibly successful mission against the Houthis.
Okay, so it was classified. So are you trying to say that the information was unclassified?
I'm not
Okay,
trying to say
that's what
anything.
I thought. You're not saying that. So you took classified information from Central Command that had a classification marking on it, because that's what's required by DoD regulations, and you put it on an unclassified system. So we're going to get a report in a few days from the DoD Inspector General. And if the DoD Inspector General finds what is pretty obvious, both to you smiling there in the witness seat and to all of us up here, that the information was, in fact, classified, do you plan to take any accountability for that?
As I pointed out at the time,
you said that accountability is back. Does that not apply to you?
as I said at the time, Congressman, there were no names, targets, locations, units, routes, sources, methods, no classified information.
Okay, so if it comes back that it is classified, will you take accountability or not? We've already established, you've already admitted that it was classified because everything you get from CENTCOM is classified. You just explained that to me. That's how you justified not answering the question.
Not what I said. I didn't confirm any classification or
Okay, so if it is
what
confirmed,
I know is that
will you take
everything
accountability?
I share, everything I talk about,
Mr.
as
Secretary,
of
does
Defense,
accountability apply to you or not?
is classified whether I talk or not.
Does it apply to you or not?
Does what apply to me or not?
Accountability. You said accountability is back at the Secretary.
And you know what? The Houthis were held accountable for shooting at our
I'm
ship
just asking if it applies to you.
very successfully.
I'm not asking about the
previous
Houthis.
administration let our ships get shot at, and nothing was done about it. And thankfully, because of the skill and courage of our troops on
I'm
the
just
battlefield,
asking about
we
I
actually
reclaim my
put them
time.
in a place
I
where
reclaim
they
my time.
called for a ceasefire.
I claim my time. I'm just asking if accountability applies to you. It's a very simple question. We use leadership by example.
Of course. Unlike, I serve at the pleasure of the president like everybody else does.
So it only applies to the president, not to you.
I serve at the pleasure.
You talked about the success of the Houthi operation. About how much money did it cost? How much money did you spend on missiles shooting at the Houthis?
Well, you'd have to compare that with what it cost.
I'm just asking how much did it cost?
Divert our shipping lanes around.
I'm told it's
the sea.
several $100 million, maybe close to $1 billion. How many U.S.-flagged commercial ships have transited the Red Sea since your so-called successful operation?
Well, thankfully, unlike the previous administration.
The answer is zero.
Military vessels transit.
No, I didn't ask about military vessels. I asked
which would
about
be the
commercial
precursor
vessels.
for
How many
civilian and
commercial vessels?
transit,
It's been several weeks. How many commercial vessels, U.S. flagged, have
Well,
transited the Red
would
Sea?
you, Mr. Congressman, put civilian ships
The
through
questions
dam
are not to
before
me,
military
Mr.
ships?
Secretary,
So
they're to you.
We have responsibly put military
The answer
ships
is zero.
through first.
I reclaim my time. How many generals and admirals have you fired?
I don't know the exact number, but
You don't know the number. It's 8. Can you explain why any of them were fired? Like, just explain why was the Army JAG fired? Why did you fire him?
they all serve at the pleasure of the president. And I think
No, I'm just asking you why.
General Kaine is a great example.
I'm just asking
of a
you
leader
why.
that we
And
need
you
at
probably
this
learned
time.
at Princeton what why means. Why did you fire him?
They serve at the pleasure of the president, and we
Why
want better
did you
representation
fire
in
him?
each and every of those.
You can't
each and
explain
every
why
one
you
of those
fired any of
places.
them?
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ma'am and Mr. Secretary, most of my questions are going to be for General Kaine. I will tell you, Mr. Secretary, I would appreciate it. Opportunity to speak with you offline about a couple of things. I'm from Georgia. Spoke with you briefly. I supported Hal and Julia Moore's name remaining on the base, as you know. I support Eisenhower's name remaining on the base. I don't want to go too far into that. I don't want any questions. But I will tell you this, the selection of Gary Gordon, one of the most valorous, heroic acts of any American soldier, certainly in modern times. He was one of the 2 soldiers that went in with Black Hawk Down, Delta snipers, that both died there together. I do have a suggestion on that. When the Army has named anything after Gary Gordon, Randall Schugart's name has been tied to the name. The Army has historically named things Shugart Gordon because those two guys went in together, they fought together, they literally died together, and the historical accounts cannot figure out which one actually died first. And so if the name in Augusta is going to change back to Gordon, I just respectfully suggest that you consider Shugart Gordon as the Army who has historically named other things. You can't tell Gordon's story without Shugart's story. I say that respectfully. General Kaine, the Communist Chinese Party assesses U.S. strength, that our strength lies in our alliances and partnerships. If they believe those ties are fraying, how can we use the Ukraine war to demonstrate U.S. strength, capability, and resolve to regain leverage over the Chinese and their assessments of the United States?
Well, sir, thanks. Thanks for the question, and first, thanks for recognizing two great warriors who showed us what courage and tenacity look like when you infill into the place that they did on those two MH-60s, knowing full well what they were going to face on that objective, and then making the full commitment to give their lives on behalf of an injured teammate. That's what America looks like. So thank you for highlighting that, sir. Bless you, Congressman, by the way.
He's a SEAL. He
yes, sir.
Work for that.
Yes, sir. I know a lot of SEALs. Sir, I think mill to mill, military to military, our relationships with allies and partners around the world remain incredibly important. I'm grateful to serve alongside so many great, not just joint force partners, but international partners as well. And I think that the courage and tenacity that our forces out in EUCOM have shown through this journey, and the teammates that they've built on both sides of those borders is an example of what we should be doing.
If I can follow up with that, the assessments, Ukraine would survive 9 days, 10 days, some 15 days at the outside. But the rapid innovation cycle that they have candidly taught us, in some cases, how do we implement that into the U.S. defense industrial base and get our weapons developed as fast and candidly at the cost, because we cannot afford to pay what we're paying per weapon for what we're going to have to do. And at the same time, how do we develop the defense systems against drones so that we don't lose multi-million-dollar tanks to $5,000 drones?
Yes, sir. Thanks for highlighting the innovative, entrepreneurial, and diabolical spirit of attack that exists out in that part of the world. And, I've been out there and seen what they're doing in terms of drone manufacturing, iterating on the line, linking up with partners, taking the fight to the enemy out there. It's impressive. And we've learned from those examples. That same spirit of innovation has come back to the United States. And when I think about rebooting our defense industrial base and our national industrial base, I think of it through 4 C's, and it starts with that culture that you're alluding to about innovation and entrepreneurialism inside combat. The second part is creating some competition, and I think that's a key part as you help us do that here in the Congress. Third thing is we gotta write better contracts on our side.
100%.
And we have to be better buyers and share the risk, as I've talked about with the chairman before. And
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair, I
Thank you,
recognize
Mr.
the gentleman from California, Mr. Carbajal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It shouldn't come as no surprise that I have serious concerns with both the deployment of the National Guard and the Marines to Los Angeles. I served in the Marine Corps. We are trained to be war fighters, not for crowd control. Everyone here should be alarmed that the President has sent armed forces into a city against the wishes of a governor and mayor. I am concerned this administration is purposely escalating the situation with this step and politicizing our armed forces in the process. Let's call it for what it is. It's political theater. Hegseth, are the Marines in Los Angeles ordered to protect property by any means necessary?
Sir, I would say the ICE officers and police officers being attacked is not political theater. The National Guard and Marines,
just yes or no. Just yes or no.
the National Guard and Marines have the full authority to protect federal ICE agents.
Yes or
federal
no.
agents, and
Just
federal buildings.
can you just say yes or no? This isn't Fox anymore. Just yes or no.
They're there to protect federal agents and federal.
Another BS answer. Under the SRUF, the use of force, are Marines allowed to fire warning shots?
No.
Now that's more like it. Isn't that easy? Well, you know, I'm going to beat this drum because you refuse to take responsibility. Will you take responsibility for having made a mistake? Not to mention, many people would say break the law in participating in the Signal group chat that included a journalist, your wife, your brother, where classified information was shared.
Sir, every way I communicate is authorized. Every way I communicate.
Okay, if you want to say that. I have called for your resignation. I didn't think you were qualified before your confirmation, and you have done nothing to inspire confidence in your ability to lead competently. You broke the law in sharing classified information, and in doing so, endangered the lives of our service members that you are responsible for. Your inability to hold yourself accountable makes you incapable to lead. This alone makes you unfit to be the Secretary of Defense. Secretary, do you think the United States should continue supporting Ukraine in its fight against Russia, a nation that is hostile towards the United States?
Well, as you know, sir, President Trump is committed to peace.
No, I just want yes or no answers.
Today, the United States has spent billions of dollars.
Yes or no? Yes or no?
Over years.
Just yes or no. Can I get a yes or no out of you?
We continue to send.
Come on.
Presidential drawdown.
It's that easy. Kindergartners can give me a yes or no. Yes or no.
Yes, we support peace in Ukraine.
Come on. Is this really leadership? You're an embarrassment to the United States. If Russia invades NATO allies, are you going to recommend to the president that we fulfill our Article 5 obligations?
Well, Russia has not invaded NATO allies.
No.
President Trump has
No. I reclaim my time. Yes or no? It's that simple.
There's Article 5 in NATO, which we recognize.
So is the answer yes or no?
That's what Article 5 is, yes.
Good. I'm glad you brought yourself to saying yes. Do you think political allegiance to Trump is a requirement for serving our nation, either in uniform or a civilian in the department?
I'm incredibly proud, as are millions of Americans.
No. Not today, Hegseth. Yes or no?
Congressman, you know what a silly question that is.
But it's silly enough to warrant a very straightforward answer. Yes or no?
We all support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
You know what? I'm not going to waste my time anymore. You're not worthy of my attention or my questions. You're an embarrassment to this country. You're unfit to lead. And there's been bipartisan members of Congress that have called for your resignation. You should just get the hell out and let somebody competently lead this department.
Mr. Chairman, do we not have any decorum in here?
Thank you very much. I yield my time.
Gentleman yields back. And I would urge everybody to remember and maintain a decorum suitable for this chamber with their further comments. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Tennessee, Dr. Desjardins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I would like to thank you, Secretary Hegseth and General Kaine, for bringing pride, strength, and respect back to our military. Many critics have described the President's deployment of the National Guard in Los Angeles as unprecedented. But as you know, we've seen similar actions throughout history, from Eisenhower sending the 101st to Little Rock, to Johnson and Kennedy federalizing the Guard over the objections of Southern governors during the Civil Rights era, to George H.W. Bush deploying federal troops during the 1992 L.A. riots. Isn't it fair to say that there's a well-established precedent for presidents acting when state leaders are either unwilling or unable to enforce federal law or protect federal facilities?
Sir, nothing that we're doing on the ground is unprecedented. I would argue what is unprecedented is a governor and a mayor unwilling to protect law enforcement.
Well, thank you for being willing to step up. Considering we're going to shift gears here to the nuclear-armed sea-launched cruise missile program. I just wanted to touch base on that other subject because I think that's ridiculous that the criticisms that we're hearing in the media. But with Putin talking freely about using low-yield or tactical nuclear weapons, I think it's important we discuss the SLCM-N program for a minute. As you know, restoring SLCM-N capability to the Navy was recommended in President Trump's 2018 nuclear posture review. The Biden administration proposed to cancel this program, but based on consistent testimony from our senior military leaders that this system was necessary to address deterrence gaps, Congress continued to fund it, and in the FY24 Defense Authorization Bill required the Department to create a dedicated program of record for its development. What is your view of the SLCM-N program and the broader issue of modernizing our nuclear forces to ensure we have nuclear deterrent that meets the evolving threats we're seeing?
Well, so your characterization is correct. I want to thank Congress for keeping SLCM-N effectively alive under the previous administration because we think it's a critical capability. And you'll see in the FY26 budget, we fund it at over 1,000% increase. So we completely recognize the need for that capability. Alongside the entirety of the nuclear enterprise is critically important to maintain deterrence. If you're going to have peace through strength, if you're going to reestablish deterrence, you need to have a credible deterrent, especially at the foundational and baseline level, which is the nuclear level.
And General Kaine, STRATCOM commanders and your Vice Chief Admiral Grady have testified about the importance from a military perspective of being able to provide the President with an additional response option and how SLCM can strengthen deterrence by providing a non-strategic response option that is not air delivered. Do you share that view?
I do.
Thank you. And General Kaine, your testimony warns that the PLA's exercises around Taiwan are not just pressure campaigns, but rehearsal for force unification. Throughout my visits to our regional partners in the Indo-PACOM region over the last few years, you can feel that there has been a rising tide of recognition that China is a threat on their doorstep and ours. As the United States and the world has awoken to the increasingly adversarial actions of China, can you expand upon how the DoD is right-sizing our force structure to prepare for a conflict in the Pacific should our adversaries continue to escalate tensions in the region? And what are we doing now, not years from now, to ensure we can stop that move if it comes?
Yes, sir. Well, first, I share your, I share your views and those of Admiral Paparo related to what certainly appears like increasing rehearsals by the PLA in and around the Pacific. The administration and the Secretary in particular through our interim National Defense Guidance and Strategy, which I won't get into in this forum, but is clear around the need for the department to focus on the Pacific and to scale our combat capability with systems, capabilities, and effects that would prevent Xi from advancing his narrative and create, frankly, multiple simultaneous dilemmas in their decision-making. And so we continue to work diligently on that through the services, as you talked about, and it's something that I'm keenly focused on with my global integrator role.
Okay, thank you. And I think Secretary Hegseth, you covered that pretty thoroughly in your opening statement. So I'm out of time, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. Kaine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, I'm hoping we can start where we may have common ground: no war in Iran. In 2016, President Trump was one of the few people on the Republican stage to have the guts to say that George W. Bush's war in Iraq was an utter disaster. He promised the American people no endless wars. Tucker Carlson has said that thousands of Americans will die if there's a war in Iran. And he is cautioning that currently neocons are trying to get President Trump into a war in Iran. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene has said the American people don't want to bomb Iran. Will you today assure the American people and the MAGA movement that you will not bomb Iran unless we are hit?
Congressman, it's good to hear you quoting conservatives.
When they're right, I quote them.
I will tell you this. The President has been earnestly and completely committed to a peace process, has given Iran every opportunity, those talks ongoing, but he also fully recognizes the threat that Iran with a nuclear weapon would exist.
Will you commit to us not bombing them? I mean, that's what the conservative MAGA movement is calling for it online. You'll see. I mean, they want a commitment that we not bomb Iran unless we're directly hit.
Well, here in this forum, it wouldn't be prudent for me to commit or not to commit. My job is to be postured and prepared in the region, just as the chairman.
How about this?
Would any potential capability?
Would you agree with this analysis that Netanyahu is itching for a fight? If Netanyahu uses American missiles to hit Iran, he's going to drag us into a war there because Iran's going to say they're using American missiles. Our military knows that you cannot just through hits eliminate Iran's nuclear capability. They'll simply go underground, and they will then end monitoring. And unlike Iraq, they're in heavily civilian sites. Will you stand up today and make it clear to Netanyahu that that escalation, what he's threatening just yesterday, is not in the American interest, that he should not be dragging America into war with Iran?
Well, Congressman, that question included a lot of speculation. What I know is that Bibi Netanyahu is going to put his country first, and we're going to put our country first, and we're positioned properly in the region to ensure that we're prepared for any potential contingency.
Are you concerned about his escalation into Iran, and will you assure the American people you're going to do everything possible to keep us out of a war in Iran?
We remain, as the President has said, committed to creating the conditions for peace, creating the conditions for talks where Iran does not have the ability to develop a nuclear weapon.
I'm running out of time, 2 minutes, so let me ask you another matter. Senator Baldwin asked you about the legal authority for the Marines in my state. I disagree with you. I thought not only do I not want Marines in Iran, I don't want them in California. But I don't want to get a gotcha. You know, they said, what provision? Your administration since then has filed in the federal district court. You're arguing that the Marines should be allowed to defend federal property. I disagree with you. That's your argument. Here's where I hope we can agree. Whatever the federal district court decides, will you abide by it?
Well, this is a pending situation.
So will you agree, though, that it's not my legal view, it's not your legal view that makes the decision in America. It's the federal judiciary. If the federal court in California and the San Francisco district judge has orders a preliminary injunction, will you agree to abide by the federal courts?
What I will tell you is my job right now is to ensure the troops that we have in Los Angeles are capable of supporting law enforcement in
Sir, I agree with that, but will you...
And we know we have the
assure,
constitutional and statutory authority
That's fine, but
can you
just assure us that you'll abide by the decisions of the courts?
We've always looked at the decisions of
the Vice President has said that he doesn't believe that the courts should be respected in military matters.
Well, this is not my lane, but we also recognize that the way in which the judiciary has expanded its powers.
But can you just give a simple? Okay, let me ask you this: two simple questions. You got 30 seconds. I'm not trying to trick you. I think it would assure the American people. Because it shouldn't be Ro Khanna's view of the Constitution, and it shouldn't be Secretary Hegseth's. It should be the Supreme Court and the federal courts. Can you assure the American people on two things? You will respect any Supreme Court decision on this matter about whether the Marines are constitutional, and you will respect the district courts when they rule before the Supreme Court rules.
What I can say is we should not have local judges determining foreign policy or national security policy for the country.
So you're not willing to say you would respect those decisions?
What I'm saying is local district judges shouldn't make foreign policy for the United States.
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Mississippi, Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Secretary Hegseth and General Kaine, for being here today. Under President Trump's leadership, America's restored deterrence and secured our southern border. Thanks to this renewed strength, we're seeing positive momentum in both recruiting and retention. Our adversaries are thinking twice, not just because of our advanced capabilities, but because of the courage and dedication of the men and women in uniform who defend this nation every day. Still, we face serious growing challenges. China remains a pacing threat. Deterring that threat requires more than just strategy. It requires a strong, responsive defense industrial base. That starts with the timely and adequate investments, and investment begin with a budget. We have to have a budget. Despite defense spending is the price of deterrence, we've got to stay focused and strong. With that being said, Mr. Secretary, I've championed the Ships for America Act with Mr. Garamendi from California and Senator Young and Senator Kelly in the Senate. I know the administration is behind this. Right now, are you committed to getting this SHIPS Act and getting our maritime industry and base to where we need it to be a strong maritime nation, which means a great nation?
Sir, I would refer to Bryn for the actual details of what is included from that bill in our budget, but I can say top line, we are historically committed. $47 billion in shipbuilding in this budget alone. It was mischaracterized because of baseline versus reconciliation, but when you look at the total investment, historic. Same with defense industrial base. So we recognize the failures and failings of the past. We're also not just pouring money into the same processes. We're hiring innovators, and we've got secretaries who are driving change, personally reviewing each shipyard across the country to recognize what's failing and what isn't, how we address workforce issues, how we address modernization.
I'm going to take that as a yes where I can get something else, because we work with the administration, the Senate, and the House, bipartisan, bicameral, throughout the administration to get that done. Acquisition reform. General Kaine, thank you for your leadership. As the committee works to streamline acquisitions through the SPEED Act and give program executive officers, PEOs, more agility, I want to make sure that we're doing the right things at DOD writ large, especially when we're talking about Navy and Air Force and some of the programs that we do. Requirements cannot be shifted on a yearly basis. They at least need to stand steady through an administration. So we need requirements that are steady. We can't tell them how to build things. What we need to tell them is the capabilities we need and let industry build that. We can't always let perfect be the enemy of good. We need to keep and maintain, during the acquisition process, intellectual property rights so that we can repair those things ourselves, so that we can 3D print. There are so many things that we can do better that we put artificial barriers because we have a risk-averse DOD now, especially in acquisitions. And finally, we need to make sure, if we say we're building 4 destroyers next year, we don't need to next year say, well, we're going to change that to 3. We have to send a steady demand signal. We have to do block buys, and we have to hold these PEOs responsible for finishing the program, or at least getting it to a point where it's in production. We cannot rotate every 2 or 3 years. Are you committed to make sure that we do everything we can to help our industrial base, give the Army, Air Force, Navy, and Marines the products they need to win?
Well, sir, there was a lot of goodness in the statement, and by the way, thank you for your service yourself here in the uniform for so many years. You covered a lot of ground between requirements to PEOs. One of the things that I think we, both the military and the Congress, are going to have to think through is how do we buy aligned with the technology development curve, back to your point about requirements. And what I need to try to think through with you is how do we ensure that the force of the future has the relevant and current combat capability to dominate on the battlefield. And technology is evolving so incredibly fast that we need both a requirement system, an acquisition system, leaders that understand that. And I think that's going to require some partnership between the department and the Congress to think through that, and clarity around what are we solving for.
And finally, real quick, Secretary Hegseth, please have the Navy get us a shipbuilding plan that is not an option. We have not had one for the last 7 years. Please get us a 30-year shipbuilding plan, of which the first 4 years are locked in.
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair, I recognize the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Keating.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to take my time to react to the testimony already given. The 3 pillars that each of the witnesses and the Secretary highlighted. Pillar number 1, restore the warrior ethos. You know, I've had the privilege in this committee to see firsthand a special window of our troops, their courage, their tenacity, their commitment. You don't have to restore the warrior ethos, sir. It's already there. We've never lost it. Pillar 2, I just want to highlight something that is a concern. Pillar 2 is the border security issue. And among that, I'm really worried about the agreement with El Salvador that exists. I think it's very cloudy. We don't know exactly what they're getting in return for their commitment to house the hellhole prisons, in the hellhole prisons they have, people that are shipped there, transported there illegally. But there's problems with that. It violates the Constitution, number one. It violates the First Step Act that President Trump paraded around and took so much credit for in his first term, he and his son-in-law, Jared Kushner. It violates the Leahy Law, which prohibits federal money to be used for prisons of that type. It violates the Foreign Assistance and Transparency and Accountability Act that our Secretary of State was a proud sponsor of, that demands taxpayer accountability for monies, because all we know is the White House has said they've given El Salvador, given their strongman, Bukele, $6 million. But then they're holding another $15 million in international narcotics and control and law enforcement to the side for prospective use here. And of concern, too, is we're now transferring helicopters, military assets, to Bukele. We're giving him helicopters. And I'm concerned about that. Supposedly it's there for humanitarian reasons. It's being taken away from the Drug Control Task Force dealing with the fentanyl issue. And now it's there for humanitarian reasons in Bukele's control. And I'm just worried about going down the road here. I think there should be strict oversight of what they're getting from the U.S. If that's not there, and there's dark money and dark assets being passed, we could have the makings of another Iran-Contra. Thirdly, the third pillar, deterrence. And I look to what every expert militarily, from a security standpoint, said is the greatest deterrent that we have with China and Russia, and our greatest weakness if we lose it. And that's the war in Ukraine. If we fail to support Ukraine, and Ukraine loses, that's a green light for China. That's just not my opinion. That's virtually every security expert. We have something China and Russia don't have. We have a coalition of 50 countries, 50, dealing together. They don't have anything near that. Yet, you've attacked that alliance. You said they're pathetic. You called them freeloaders. They have paid, and we want more money, and they're giving more money for their own defense, but they've given $199 billion towards Ukraine, more than the U.S., by the way. And they're not freeloaders when they came to our assistance at 9/11. They suffered thousands of casualties, several hundred deaths. They're young men and women, sacrificed to defend Article 5, the only time it was exercised for the United States. They're not freeloaders dealing with that. And yet today, you attacked one of them saying that now you've confirmed that the U.S. has plans in place to invade the territory of a founding member of NATO, Denmark. That's not being strong. That's not being strong. It's also chaotic. This is the chaos cabinet when it comes to Ukraine. Secretary of the Treasury, Putin is a war criminal. Trump's chief negotiator, Putin is trustworthy. He's not a bad guy. Secretary of State, Putin was a war criminal, I guess, but now he's not. He doesn't know. Trump says Ukraine was the aggressor. The Secretary of State says Russia was the aggressor. You, sir, the Secretary of Defense, said Russia was the aggressor. The chair of Joint Chiefs said yesterday that Putin would even stop at Ukraine. The Trump ambassador resigned because of this policy, and I think Vice President Vance said it best. He said he doesn't care what happens to Ukraine one way or the other. That is not strength. That is not using our coalition. That is not deterrence. You're wrong on all your pillars. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Nebraska, Chairman Bacon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to welcome all three of you here. I appreciate you being here, and I want to congratulate the chairman. I served 3 decades in the Air Force. I didn't serve with you, but many of my friends have, and they think very highly of you, so our congrats. Mr. Secretary, during your comments early on, I would say I agree with you. Homeland security, defense of the homeland is important. China is our pacing threat. I agree with that. but we never hear Russia. You didn't mention it in your comments up front. It's not just you, it's the entire administration. 2/3 of Americans see clearly that Russia's a threat, that they're the aggressor in Ukraine. It's in our national security interest that Ukraine prevails here, because Russia will not stop Ukraine. Just this week, Putin said that he would only stop the invasion of Ukraine if we pull out of the Baltic countries. I mean, this just gives you some insight to what Putin's thinking. What we see right now in the administration is some moral blindness here. We want moral clarity, and we want strength when it comes to Russia. Secondly, I also share concerns about the firing of the generals. Yes, it's currently very much your constitutional right to fire and hire generals, and the president has that right. But there's also decency involved here. I've known many of these people. I was served with most of these folks when I was a colonel and as a one-star. I knew one as a captain. They served their whole adult life. And I think they deserved an explanation why they were fired. And I think the American people deserve that as well. And the impact on Cyber Command, having General Hawk fired. We groomed him for over a decade to fill those shoes. And I don't know that anybody can fill those shoes right now. It's going to take a year or two for people to get there. I really believe that the most happy people on the firing of General Hawk was Russia and China. Now for my questions. I'm on the cyber subcommittee. I chair that committee. We learn, and we know, and I know you all know, that Russia and China are attacking us every day. I also have learned that within the executive branch, there are very limiting rules of engagement on what Cyber Command can do in response. I would ask both the Secretary and the Chairman if you would review those rules of engagement and see if they're right. I think we should be carrying a bigger stick here when we're being attacked every day. So would you at least look at those rules of engagement and consider revamping them?
Sir, we do review those on a regular basis, and I would say there's been some incorrect reporting on what has or has not been done, but internally we're ensuring that anything we do on cyber offense or cyber defense is coordinated with the administration's priorities and the way in which the department views threats and how we manage them in real time.
So as I mentioned, I'm the chairman of the committee, and I've talked to multiple layers. They are restricted based off of the rules of engagement. Maybe they're appropriate. I just hope we relook at them, because if China can attack our energy grid, our Wall Street grid, our hospitals, I think we should be reviewing, okay, is our responses adequate? So I just wanted to submit that for you to think about and consider. I agree China is the pacing threat. And the best way we want to prevent a war. Day one of a war with China and Taiwan is a day too late. I happen to know that we owe billions of dollars of weapons to China, or to Taiwan. We've committed to them, or they purchased them. And this is really a previous administration's fault. We're talking billions of dollars of weapons. They need sea mines now. They need Harpoon missiles, air and missile defense, things like that. I asked the previous secretary under the previous administration, what are you doing about it? He says, well, I'm studying it. He's the secretary. I just asked for your all's review and figure out who's behind do we got to kick to start getting these weapons to Taiwan faster so we have deterrence. And I just appreciate your comment to that.
I'll defer to the chairman as well, but this is not something we're simply reviewing. It's something we are implementing in real time. I think there was a lot of talk about a shift to the Indo-Pacific in previous administrations, but the department had not put in place, not just, there was strategy changes at some level, but driving change into the institution to make decisions, prioritize, and trade-offs in your budget, in force posture, in training and exercises, in where you forward position troops and munitions. Those are the things we're actioning in real time, and I think very differently than in the past, with a realistic view of what threats could emerge in the Indo-Pacific. I defer to the chairman.
Sir, I'll just add in general terms about the size and capacity of our defense assistance worldwide. You know, that all tacks back to our national and defense industrial base, and what I'm encouraged by is the leaders that we have in the department, in the joint force, and in the Congress right now. It feels like if not now, then when, and if not us, then who? And these are the right leaders across the USG to get after this and to support through
Let's
deter this fight now.
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Pennsylvania, Ms. Houlihan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, I've been looking forward very much to our time together. My name is Chrissy Houlihan. In addition to representing a part of Pennsylvania, the 6th District, I also am a veteran. I come from a family of veterans and service members, and it's very deeply personal to me, this conversation that we're having, as I know it is to you as well. Over the last several days, I've had the opportunity to watch a bit of the hearings that you have testified at this week, and I can see and know that you have quite a bit to say. But since I only have 5 minutes, I'm going to try and focus my time on a concept that you talk about very frequently, and that is lethality. By definition, lethality simply means being capable of causing death. Secretary Hegseth, I have a couple of clarifying questions that I'd like very much to get through. So in the interest of time and efficiency, I would ask just simply for a yes or no from you for the answers to these questions in advance, and I thank you. So given that definition of lethality, would it be fair to say that both men and women are, generally speaking, capable of causing death?
It depends
yes or no, sir.
Depends on the context.
Yes or no. Yes or no. Are men and women capable of causing death?
It depends on the context.
Yes or no.
It depends on the context.
It's unbelievable to me that you can't come up with an answer whether or not a man or a woman can cause death. That's an obvious yes. Would it be fair to say that the U.S. military trains our soldiers in multiple ways to be capable of causing death, whether they are men or women?
That's a big part of our job.
Yes. Would it be fair to say that both men and women are capable of pulling a trigger of a rifle to cause death? Yes or no?
Sure.
And would it be fair to say that both men and women are capable of operating an unmanned combat drone or maybe pushing a button to launch a missile to cause death again? Yes or no?
I know what you're getting at, ma'am.
Yes.
But it is,
so lastly,
men and women
sir,
carry equipment differently, a 155 round differently,
sir,
a rucksack differently,
reclaiming my time, I asked about missiles and drones, sir.
It is the gentlelady's
time. Reclaiming my time,
pause.
sir.
It is the gentlelady's time.
Would it be fair, finally, to say that both men and women are capable of piloting a jet or a helicopter to combat people and to cause death as a consequence?
A lot of wonderful female pilots.
Yes or no? So while I agree with you that physical fitness, as you were mentioning, is a very strong and important component of lethality, the warfighter that you have written about in your books and talked about on various podcasts is but a very, very small piece of the overall lethality picture. In fact, we estimate only about 10% of our military personnel are directly involved in the kind of combat that you're referring to. Rather, 90%, that's the math, of our troops are doing other jobs that support and enable those 10%. So to put it simply, lethality cannot be measured solely by the damage that a 6'3", 225-pound Christian male with a rifle can do to the enemy anymore. Sure, I agree he's part of that solution, but it is an incomplete and at best very dangerous and very homogeneous description of that. Lethality is equal parts technical skills, tactical experience, cognitive problem solving, and physical fitness. It's not about one person, but it's about many. It's not about blue or red. It's not about liberal or conservative, Christian, Jewish, or agnostic. It's not about North and South. Here are some statements that you have said previously about women in service. This is 2024, sir, not when you were a 19-year-old. You have said that women are life givers, that dads push us to take risks, and that moms put the training wheels on our bikes, that we need moms, but not in the military. Secondly, you have said, I am straight up just saying we should not have women in combat roles. It hasn't made us more effective, and it hasn't made us more lethal. With what's left of my time, sir, I will say to you that women have served our country for 200+ years in our militaries and in service and protection of our nation. They are watching you, what you do and what you say, and we deserve better from you. Women can and do serve with lethality today. We can and do all of the jobs that are required of us. Yes or no, do you believe military women should be in all roles in the military?
Women have joined
yes
our military
no, sir.
in record numbers
should
under this
women
administration.
be in all roles in the military?
Standards should be high and equal for
yes
all positions.
Or no, sir, we agree. Should
Standards,
they be in all roles in the military?
My job is that
yes
10%
or no?
stays as sharp as
Reclaiming
possible.
my time.
Standards should be high and equal.
Reclaiming my time, will you agree that that women should be able to perform in all combat roles, assuming they meet the standards?
Gentley's time's expired.
It's all about standards.
Before we move to the next witness, I would like to hearken back to my several decades ago time as a trial lawyer and remind the members, you control your questions. The witness controls his or her answers. You can ask a yes or no question, but the witness is entitled to give his or her answer the way they choose to frame it. With that, I recognize the gentleman from Texas, Dr. Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses for being here today. I deeply appreciate your time. Mr. Secretary, I would like to start by apologizing for some of the rude and childish behavior that was demonstrated earlier by one of my colleagues. I think I speak for several members on this committee. I apologize for that. Unfortunately, it's probably not the last bit of disrespectful grandstanding that's going to take place before this hearing is over. Secretary, under President Donald Trump's leadership, our government has been refocused on the most pressing challenges facing our nation. Instead of woke DEI and climate change programs, this administration is advancing our military readiness and lethality. As adversaries seek to challenge the United States, we must do better to equip, train, and defend this great nation. And Mr. Secretary, on behalf of the patriotic Americans in the 13th Congressional District of Texas, I want to thank you for what you're doing to reclaim our military. I think you're doing a wonderful job. Last month at SOF Week, you stressed an important and foundational SOF truth. People, not equipment, make the critical difference. Our SOF community employ a number of capabilities and special expertise that bolster our ability to deter the PRC and set conditions, if needed, that provide the United States with distinctive advantages. We ask a lot of our special operations forces, more and more as each day goes by, and that's only going to continue. Crisis response remains a critical mission performed by SOCOM, and despite flat funding, this responsibility has risen as high as 200% over the last decade. Mr. Secretary, as you highlighted during SOF Week, our operators' lethal precision and timely crisis response capabilities have met these growing demands every single time. Given this significant and sustained increase in operational tempo, what can the department do to alleviate resource constraints in SOCOM's budget to ensure critical crisis response capabilities are properly funded and that our SOF operators can continue to meet the evolving global threats, both with great power competition and in the counterterrorism arena?
It's a great question, sir. I appreciate it. We start by listening to those units, to those men, what they're facing, what they need, what their families need, and then resource it. Because not only have they been used more than anybody else over the last 20 years, but even in just the last 4 or 5 years, the amount of times we call on the Special Forces community, Special Operations community, has increased. So the funding needs to match that, which you'll see in this budget. The training needs to be commensurate with it. And then I think morale and standards really matter. There's a reason why we've looked at schoolhouses of some of our most elite Special Operations forces and ensured that standards have not eroded, because under the previous administration, for political reasons, in pursuit of political correctness, for other ideologies, standards were dropped, whether formally or informally, amongst certain communities, to sometimes reach quotas or sometimes for ideological perspectives. We want to ensure standards go up to the highest possible level. Anyone who can qualify meets those standards, and guess what that does for those units? It increases morale, increases unit cohesion, because they know they're as capable as they can possibly be.
Thank you. General Kaine, do you have anything to add to that?
Sir, most of those matters are policies that my civilian leaders set and not something that the Joint Force weighs in on, as you know, and thank you for your service.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And I will say that, we've had lots of discussions about this, and I know you're aware of this, but the Special Operations community is being spread extremely thin right now. And, SOCOM, JSOC, they're repeatedly and more often having to tell the geographic combatant commanders that they cannot do what they're being asked to do just because they don't have the resources or the people to do the job. So anything I can personally do, and I'm sure many others on this committee, we're willing to make sure that we can do that. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Crow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Chairman Kaine, Secretary Hegseth, and Mrs. McDonald. You're doing a great job today, Mrs. McDonald. Secretary Hegseth, we have a lot of things in common. In fact, our careers started the same way. We were both infantry officers. We were both platoon leaders. We both deployed our platoons to combat in a counterinsurgency environment. There are very few better leadership training grounds in that experience, and it's that experience that I want to transport us back into time, back to Lieutenant Hegseth and Lieutenant Crow. There are a lot of things that make a leader and that make a unit effective. Would you say that unit cohesion is important?
Unit cohesion amongst many is very important, yes, sir.
It's an important element. And part of that is making sure that all members of your unit felt included in that team, correct?
Far more important that every member of that unit felt capable to do the mission and united in that mission.
But that they were included and felt part of the team as well.
I wouldn't use the word inclusion, sir, but yes, they were cohering as a team, yes.
And that you reduce tension and infighting and points of tension between your platoon members so that you can focus on the mission. That was a part of the regular job.
Absolutely. That's why I've said that our diversity is our strength is the single dumbest phrase in military history.
And words are
our
important.
Unity is our strength. And
Words.
so unity amongst members, despite differences of backgrounds, race, whatever that is.
And I agree with you on that.
Together on a mission.
And words, part of that is words are important and setting the tone is important, correct? When you're a leader.
All aspects of leadership, mostly leading by example.
Did you ever
and
tell
also
them your
giving
political
clear
affiliation?
guidance.
Did you ever tell your platoon members your political affiliation?
We certainly discussed lots of topics, and I'm sure my political affiliation.
Did you ever ask them theirs?
No, their political affiliation was never a concern to me.
Because it's important that everybody feel included and that people weren't excluded, correct? That would be
My
antithetical to
I'm sure my platoon contained Republicans, Democrats, and independents, and I had no idea what their affiliation was.
Okay, that was actually my next question, so I appreciate you answering that. You led your unit in a counterinsurgency environment, and you interacted with civilians, correct?
Interacted with members of the civilian population, sure.
Yep. And you were, in fact, a Kaine instructor, a counterinsurgency instructor, correct?
In Afghanistan in 2011 and 2012, I was the senior counterinsurgency instructor.
And you signed off on a manual. There's actually a counterinsurgency manual that you signed off on and helped create. And your name is on that manual, correct?
We were a part of creating a lot of content at the Kaine Academy, yes.
Do you remember this portion of the manual? It says, if you've killed 2 innocents, you've set yourself back more than you've moved forward. Do you still agree with that?
I would have to take a look at the manual, but obviously no one in warfare is seeking to kill innocents.
Okay. Because it's important to show why we're different from the enemy. Because we're not the enemy, right? We're different from our adversary. Would you agree with that? We have different morals and different values.
We are not the enemy, sir.
We have different morals and we have different values than the enemy.
We have a code, a uniform code of military justice.
So the answer to that is
inside
yes.
our formations that
You're not trying to compare us to Al-Qaeda and ISIS, are you? We're different.
I know the code of the United States military and army that I signed
You
up
can't
for.
tell me whether we're
Raised my
different?
right hand.
You're not willing to say we're
Of course
different?
we're different.
Okay, thank you.
It's absurd.
That's why I'm trying to reconcile the fact that we learned many of the same lessons as platoon leaders about unit cohesion, making sure that people were included, that we didn't ask people's political affiliation, that we interacted respectfully with civilian populations, that what a leader says matters, that the tone you set matters, that we are not the enemy, that we are different from them, we lead differently, we have different morals. How can I reconcile that experience and those lessons learned from Lieutenant Hegseth to now Secretary Hegseth, where you say things like what you just saw here, making us equivalent on the same standards as our adversaries, doing the same things that ISIS and Al-Qaeda would do? How can you possibly reconcile that? I can't. And just the other day down at Fort Bragg in our beloved 82nd Airborne Division, sitting there while we politicize the military and pull our paratroopers into politics, booing elected officials, booing politicians with whom you disagree. It's antithetical to our values, and you, sir,
Gentlemen,
have changed.
time's expired. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Jimenez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, when you say that you want the military to have standards, high standards, is that for each job classification you are going to be setting the standards that that job classification merits?
Sure. So if you're looking at combat arms, you're going to have a certain set of standards there that are very important.
And that anybody who meets that standard is qualified to have that job, whether it be male, female, whatever race, political affiliation, et cetera.
That is we've made that clear from day one, that those jobs are open to anybody that can reach the standard for that particular job. It shouldn't be lowered for any reason.
Fair enough, but are you, when you're setting these standards, are you going to make sure that they don't set artificial barriers for entry for anybody? In other words, if you don't want a particular race or gender, you're going to set standards that kind of, push them away? Or are you going to be fair in setting your standards?
The only thing that matters in the setting of standards is the capability to do the job.
Fair enough. And I think that that's all we ask for. I'm going to transition a little bit, and you're saying about peace through strength. Our doctrine is peace through strength, correct?
Yes, sir.
And the only way that really that works is if your enemy knows that you will use that strength. Is that correct?
Yes, credible and capable matters.
And would you say that if you are ambiguous about using that strength, that actually invites not peace but war?
Well, I think, sir, there are certain environments where strategic ambiguity is an important thing, but for the most part, your enemy or adversary needs to know you are capable and willing to use force if necessary. Yes,
fair enough. Would you consider Russia and China to be allies?
Unfortunately, especially under the previous administration, the Biden administration, policies have driven Russia and China into an even greater alliance, yes.
And so would you consider that anything that benefits Russia in its aggression would also benefit China?
I don't know that I would agree with every characterization of that statement, but certainly if you're benefiting folks that are on the same side, that matters.
Fair enough. Now, I commend you and the Trump administration for pushing our allies, our NATO allies, into defending more of Europe. In other words, it's their responsibility. They have a bear in their backyard. They need to understand they have a bear in their backyard, and that they need to protect themselves from that bear. But if that bear gets out of hand, will the United States come to its aid?
Sir, the goal of this administration is peace in Ukraine, and there's no doubt about that, and we understand who the aggressor is in that scenario.
I'm not talking about Ukraine. I'm saying if the bear, okay, and we are NATO, we're a part of NATO, okay? If the bear starts getting out of hand and we're part of NATO, will the United States, fulfill its duties under NATO's obligation?
Well, Article 5 is a real part of NATO. We acknowledge that, never have not. But at the same time, we have been very aggressive in reminding Europe it is responsible for its defense. No, that's not a small thing. Because the previous administration allowed.
I'm not saying it's a small thing at all. Okay, I agree with it. The NATO nations need to be more involved in their own defense. I agree. They need to bear a big portion of that defense. But we're part of an alliance.
But increasingly, not just a bigger part, but the lead of their defense on the continent, 80 years on after World War II. The belief of this administration is that European countries ought be able to build credible capabilities that the bear fears and worries about, not a continual backstop reliance on the United States of America for decades and decades and decades. And that's why a 5% commitment for European countries is a huge focus for this administration that only President Trump could have achieved. Because in a world of a lot of threats, you can't just continually stay in the same posture in the same places for the same reasons of the last 80 years. So we're encouraged by the investment of our European allies.
I've only got a certain amount of time. I need to put this out, okay? I believe, like when we started out this conversation, okay, that it's imperative that that bear knows that, yes, Europe needs to protect itself, but that the United States will also demonstrate peace through strength in order to keep the peace in Europe, and I yield my time back.
Gentleman yields. At this time, the chair would like to note that at approximately 12:30, the committee will recess for 15 minutes and reconvene at 12:45. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Maine, Mr. Golden.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Secretary Hegseth, yesterday Admiral Kilby testified before the committee about the importance of fielding DDG Flight 3 ships. The anti-air ballistic missile radar capabilities are chief among the reasons why. I'm sure you know that you could ask just about any of the U.S. flagged merchant vessels that have been attacked by the Houthis or the Americans who were protected by destroyers when Iran attacked Israel with its large-scale missile attack, why these ships are so important. So we don't have a complete budget request from your department yet, but the word on the street is that it's going to request 0 new destroyers. Of course, destroyers are well known as the backbone of any modern Navy fleet, and China is closing the gap between us and them, having doubled its destroyer fleet in the last 20 years. I'm also now hearing that the President plans to eliminate the frigate program outright. Yesterday, Senator Collins asked you about the absence of anything referencing destroyers in your FY26 spreadsheets that were delivered to Congress. You didn't really answer the question. Instead, you referenced a historic shipbuilding investment that is forthcoming. So just focusing on destroyers, there's really nothing historic about the 2 destroyers in the reconciliation bill. Just last year, Congress funded 3 new destroyers. We did 2 in FY24. We did 3 in FY23. So from my perspective, the reconciliation bill sets you up for an easy opportunity to increase the size of America's destroyer fleet. So I want to give you an opportunity to tell us what this committee could expect in the FY26 request pertaining to destroyers. I know you've been talking a lot about trade-offs, and in the short term, I would agree that maybe there's no immediate negative trade-offs there or negative effects of not requesting any destroyers, but in the midterm and long term, I think surely any gap in production of destroyers may come back to bite us. So I wanted to hear what your thinking is here.
Appreciate the question, sir. We are procuring destroyers, and I would contrast the previous administration's budget, last budget effectively, which procured 5 ships. This one includes 19.
I'm talking about destroyers only here.
There's a plus-up of destroyers. We are reviewing the frigate program for reasons I think this committee is well aware of. Another one of those difficult decisions that we think we're in a place where we have to make them. Again, another program that was supposed to be off the shelf and reflecting something based on an existing design that was gold-plated time and time again and pushed backwards. So that is one of the things we are reviewing. But yeah, we call it historic because it's multiples of what we had before. Not all destroyers, because you've got a lot of back-end capabilities you need to invest in to be effective in the maritime space. But it does make a historic investment.
You said plus up. When you say that, are you referencing the 2 destroyers in the reconciliation bill?
Yes, sir.
And so that would be a plus up on top of forthcoming requests for more destroyers in the FY26 budget request.
I would have to, Bren, how would you break that down?
Yes, sir. So our budget, as the Secretary said, is 1 budget, 2 bills. So the 2 destroyers he's referencing are the 2 in the reconciliation bill.
Okay, so again, does that mean that you will request additional destroyers as part of the FY26 NDAA and appropriations process, yes or no?
When we built the budget, sir, the 4-month review that the Secretary referenced, we found a requirement for 2 destroyers in FY26, so the budget only requests 2 across both bills.
Yeah, absolutely. The Navy's been planning to get 2 destroyers in FY26 and FY27. However, I think this committee, the Senate, appropriators as well, have been pretty clear that the destroyers in reconciliation were to supplement that anticipated request of 4 ships in 2 years, not supplant it. So, you know, I suppose if that's all you're asking for, it'll be up to members of this committee in the Congress whether or not we want to exercise what we think is the right call here, which would be to grow the size of our destroyer fleet, not slow down its growth. So with that, you can take the 40 seconds if you have any other comments, or I'll yield it back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair, I recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Luttrell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, General Kaine, and Ms. McDonald, thank you for joining us today. Mr. Secretary, I'm very laser focused in on the advancements and the build out of hypersonic capabilities in our military. And at the classification levels, obviously in this room, and I'll always be concerned and you know, always plan for the worst and hope for the best. But we are very far behind when it comes to our ability to build out hypersonics. The nefarious actors globally are really kind of taking advantage of that over the past 2 decades, and they're way out front. Can you give me, and you can pass this off to Mr. Kaine if you like, but I'd like to hear where we are, and are we moving forward aggressively enough to outfit our arsenal?
I will defer to the chairman on that, but very aggressive. Long-range fires, hypersonics are central to this FY26 budget in some creative ways as well. So I wouldn't fully agree with every characterization of what you said. We're catching up in quickly on capabilities, and that's because of things that are known and things that are unknown in hypersonics, because that's a capability that we need to have existing and
need to have. Well said. Yes, sir.
Need to have.
General?
Congressman, first, thanks for your service in the teams. Appreciate it. And a bunch of SEALs in the room here, so I'll be mindful of that.
They're not as good as I was.
No comments, sir.
Case in point.
Yes, sir. Sir, it's very much on our joint force radar. As you know, the services handle a lot of that. The Navy's all over SM-6 Block 1B, which will hit in 2029. The Air Force is working on HACM and doing operational tests on that now, and thinks that was progressing along the way. We're looking at partnering with industry to look at additional capacity and capability in the hypersonic side, but the ability to leverage that capability to cause dilemmas in those ground force commanders on the other side is key and essential, and something that we're very focused on through the services.
Okay, good to hear. Mr. Secretary, I've spoken to the Secretary of Navy, Secretary of Army. I've spoken to Secretary Collins in the VA, and I'm going to completely shift gears on this with you. If I'm able to accomplish anything, and I'm putting this out for public consumption, so I'm probably going to get beat up for it, but if I can, before I leave this place, this wonderful place we call Washington, D.C., if I can make the transition from Department of Defense, our service members, into the VA space seamless and effective, I have done something amazing. Now, as a veteran yourself, I can understand, I most certainly understand, you know the complexities of what it looks like when somebody says, hey, thank you for your service, here's everything you need. The VA is that way. We lose 6,000 veterans a year to suicide. We have disability claims that are through the roof, and our veteran community is more or less lost. And I wholeheartedly believe if the DoD and the VA worked shoulder to shoulder with this, where it was almost just a drag and drop. Here's your DoD service record. VA, he or she are on the way. There we go. You have them. We're good to go. And the VA and the veteran is absolutely taken care of. That does not exist currently, and it's something that I'm working every day on. And I know you will support this. I'm probably putting words in your mouth, and I shouldn't do that, but I want you and the Secretary of the VA to if you haven't been in the room together to talk about this, I'd love to be involved, but I want this put to bed. This is a problem that has existed for decades and decades and decades, and it shouldn't. And I think if we make this process easier, we'll decrease the amount of veteran suicides down to zero. Our veteran space will be just wholeheartedly happier, and then we can move on and focus on other things.
As you know, I do agree wholeheartedly. I hope you've seen Secretary Collins and I, we looked for it. We've never seen a memorandum written together by a DoD secretary and VA secretary, which we signed together in his office at the VA. He came to see me. We talked about it. I came to see him in his office. We put out a video and a memorandum and put our staffs together to say, this is a problem we need to fix. We need to streamline that transition in real time for those who serve. So we're fully committed.
Thank you, sir, and I'll reach out to your office for that point of contact so I'm not going to hover over top of them, but I'd like to have somebody I can talk to on a weekly basis. Thank you, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes a gentlelady from California, Ms. Jacobs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all of our witnesses for being here. Secretary Hegseth, as you probably know, today is National Women's Veterans Day, and in your confirmation hearing and in subsequent conversations, you've said, and I'm quoting you now, women in our military have and continue to make amazing contributions across all aspects of our battlefield, and that women were some of the best soldiers you served with. Do you still stand by those statements?
Yes.
Great. Thank you. As you probably know, I represent San Diego, the biggest military community in the country, so I meet with countless service members all the time. And with your focus on emphasis and on merit and standards, I wanted to tell you about 3 incredible women in our military. So the first woman is a major responsible for advanced collective warfighting training. Her officer evaluation report rates her as most qualified. And some of the comments included are, and I'm quoting now, "She lives the Army values and demonstrates the warrior ethos daily. She rates within the top 5% of officers I've encountered in 18 years of military service." The second woman is an aviator with a record of over 50 combat missions, including deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan. 2 quotes from her most recent fitness report in April include, quoting again, "People excel under her leadership, and she has my strongest possible recommendation for promotion." The third woman is an instructor for an Army ROTC battalion. According to her evaluation report, her overall performance was rated at far exceeds standards, and the comments include, "She is undoubtedly within the top 5% of non-commissioned officers I've worked with in my 22 years of service." Given their stellar qualifications and accomplishments and their record of surpassing standards, I assume that you agree that the Pentagon and the services should do everything they can to retain women like these, correct?
I would commend the major, the aviator, and the instructor for their service.
Great. I'm glad you agree, because I also believe we should be recruiting and retaining the very best and brightest in our country to serve in the military. And yet, you are actually kicking out these 3 highly qualified service members solely because of their identity. These are trans women. And you are using the very same arguments that have been used against desegregating the military or allowing women to serve or allowing gay people to serve. And in all those cases, those arguments were wrong. So I think it's clear that this is actually not about standards or, and I'm quoting you again, "an equal, unwavering, gender-neutral, merit-based system," because if it were, you would be keeping these women in. Instead, you are the one injecting culture wars into the military, and it's at the detriment of our military readiness and national security. Now, General Kaine, I'd like to turn to you.
So to be clear, these are men who think they're women.
These are women. I'm happy to educate you on,
But these are men,
on trans
and so
issues at another
what we've
time.
identified is that there's mental health issues with that belief system.
I'd like to turn to General
are
Kaine
detrimental
now.
to readiness, and that's the determination that we've made and that we stand behind. Gender dysphoria.
And so you don't
complications.
trust your commanding officers to be able to evaluate the people under them to decide if that were true, wouldn't that show up in their fit reps? And yet these fit reps are from the last 3 months, and all of their commanding officers say that they exceed standards. I'm turning to General Kaine now. General Kaine, I'd like to touch on something you said yesterday before the Senate Appropriations Committee. When asked whether the United States is under a foreign invasion, you said, "At this point in time, I don't see any foreign state-sponsored folks invading." Despite that testimony, 2,000 National Guard troops have been federalized and deployed to Los Angeles, and 700 Marines from my community of Southern California are now on the ground there as well. And on Tuesday, President Trump, flanked by hundreds of uniformed troops, said they are there, said this is the reason they are there. They are there, I'm quoting now. "Generations of Army heroes did not shed their blood on distant shores only to watch our country be destroyed by an invasion." General, have you personally informed the President that according to your own assessment, there is no invasion?
Ma'am, first, the definition of an invasion, whether or not that's a policy, that's really a policy decision. And, from a military-only perspective, I, stand by what I said yesterday. But, my advice to the President in any particular matter from a security standpoint, or for the Secretary for that matter, I keep that between them.
I understand that, but the highest-ranking military advisor in the country does not believe there is an invasion, and yet the President of the United States is federalizing the National Guard and deploying
Gentlelady's
active
time's
duty
expired.
Marines in the name of an
Gentlelady's time's expired. This will be the last member before we have our break. Gentlelady from South Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just to clarify, I want everyone to know that men are not women, and I find it deeply offensive as a woman who's broken glass ceilings. So to all the women out there who are fighting their way through their track meets, their scholarships, their jobs against mentally ill men. I want you to know, Republicans, we see you and we support you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to Secretary Hegseth and General Kaine for joining us today. The Department of Defense and our armed forces exist to protect our country's interests and our citizens' freedoms. Under the previous administration, this mission was supplanted by divisive ideology and social experimentation. Allowing ideological advocacy to come before military readiness was an enormous mistake. At the direction of President Trump and under your leadership, the DoD is rightfully returning to its focus on lethality and readiness. Our country faces a complex array of challenges and must maintain unparalleled readiness. The changes you are implementing at DoD are critical to returning our military to its core mission. So I have a few questions for you, Secretary Hegseth, today. How much did the Biden administration spend on DEI programs at DoD?
Well, when you look at directly or ancillary reflections of it, it was billions of dollars, ma'am.
And did it focus on equitable outcomes rather than merit or improve our effectiveness in the military?
No, I think if you look at ongoing operations under the Biden administration and also recruiting and retention under the administration, it was a distraction, not an enabler.
Do DEI programs make our military more lethal?
No.
Secretary Hegseth, how much money did the Biden administration spend on the chemical and surgical mutilation of our service members under the guise of gender-affirming care?
I don't know, but $1 is too much.
I agree. Did sex change experiments in the chemical and surgical mutilation or castration of service members improve our defense capabilities and make us more lethal?
No.
That's what I thought. Secretary Hegseth, can a history of mental health conditions disqualify someone from military service?
Yes.
And is gender dysphoria a documented mental illness included in this list of disqualifying conditions?
It was not, but it is now, per an executive order from the White House and reinforced by the Defense Department. Gender dysphoria is properly recognized as a mental disorder and a disqualifying one for military service.
God bless America. Okay, so I welcome the announcement of the Navy that they would be ending animal testing on cats and dogs. Huge win for animal lovers and those against the barbaric treatment of cats and dogs. However, I understand there are still some active Biden-era dog and cat tests being funded by the DoD. Secretary, do you plan to end these experiments as well?
As you know, Congresswoman, we've looked at a lot of those. We've reviewed a lot of those, and we've ended a lot of those. There are probably others under review, and we will do that.
I would love for you all to do a review and eliminate all of them, to see them ended as well. Do you think you'll enact a DoD-wide ban on conducting or funding cat and dog experiments? Do you think that'll be in the future under your leadership?
We will review that. Right now, our focus is studies that actually add to our capability, our readiness, our warfighting ethos. So if they don't contribute to enabling better capabilities, then they will be reviewed and ended.
Okay, and talk to me about recruitment. How far, you've already hit your recruitment numbers this year so far, right? Or close to it?
In record numbers, yeah, months and months ahead in all services.
Why do you think that is?
Well, I think a new commander-in-chief was elected in November and inaugurated in January, and I used to call it the Trump bump. I think you can't call it that anymore. It's a tsunami of young Americans who believe in the direction President Trump is taking the country, and specifically his leadership as commander-in-chief, and they look at a fighting force that's going to be back to basics. We get accused of wanting to do ideology. It was ideology on the other side that was pushed into the military.
Yeah.
We're pulling that out and getting back to basics, fidelity to the Constitution, focus on warfighting. Americans respond when that's the focus, and that's what we've seen.
So if there's a young person watching today on C-SPAN, and I hope that there are a few, and if they're looking at, they don't know what they want to do with the rest of their life, how do they get recruited into the military? What can they go do today, right now, to come work for you?
Well, the menu is large of any different services, any different jobs, and contrary to the narrative being pushed by one side, we have record number of females, minorities as well. This is not just one group of people joining the military, and we welcome all Americans who are qualified to serve our country.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. As previously stated, the committee will stand in recess for 15 minutes.
I brought some food.